It didn't stop anyone from talking at all, did it? Good morning, everybody. Hi, and good morning to everybody online. Thank you very much indeed for coming. I'm Nigel Walker, Head of Innovation Lending at Innovate UK, and we're here to talk this morning about innovation loans. Some housekeeping to start with. There is scheduled to be a fire alarm test at 11. So don't panic when it goes, if the fire alarm goes off at 11. If it goes off at any other time, obviously don't panic. Orderly exit through the doors, follow the signs. I'm sure there are expert people here because this is a professional conference centre and they'll help us, and they'll probably have high-vis jackets and cool things like that. The facilities, I noticed some loos back by the stairs when we came in. We've got a reason. Normally I make a joke at this point that the queue for the gents will be really, really, really long, and the lady in the room can swan into loo on her own. We've got a reasonably diverse crowd, which is really, really good. We like that. At Innovate UK, we really believe that innovation should come from any part of the community, all sorts of different people, different mindsets. So diversity and innovation is really, really good. So thank you for that. What are we going to do? I'm going to start off by talking about innovation loans, what they are, where they come from, how we've arrived at this idea, what we're seeking to achieve with innovation loans. Normally at an Innovate UK briefing event, we stand up in front of you and we read out the instructions for 3 hours, and you get really, really bored. And that is quite a dull thing to do. So we're trying to be slightly different. In that I'll explain the background, so yeah, I will bore you, and there's one slide that's really long and full of words, but we'll get into that because I really, really like it. Instead of us just giving you the instructions, we've got a panel today who are Kira, Sarah, Sean and Henry, and we're going to talk about sort of where money comes from, particularly when one's thinking about financing growth through innovation, to try to put innovation loans into context. What I would like you as business leaders to have is a range of choices, and to try to put together your technology strategy, your commercialisation strategy and your funding strategy for growth through innovation, and think about where innovation loans might fit within that. And if they do fit within that, if they're right for you and you're right for them, then we'd love you to apply. If they're not the right thing, then hopefully through this panel you get a sense of other options that might be available to you and other forms of support. Then we'll have a break, just a quick one for a cup of coffee, and then actually it's not Ian Tracy and Emma Fadlon from the Knowledge Transfer Network. Instead of going through the detail of what every single question in the Part A, the project part of your application, has to say, we'll talk about or give a presentation that's sort of informally called the Assessor's Prayer. So what an assessor would pray for in, oh, please let me see a decent application. So some hints and tips on how to write a compelling application around your project. And then I will talk about our approach to credit, so what we're thinking about in that Part B of the application around the business that we need to look at from a lending point of view. And then at the end we'll wrap up with a presentation from Thang, who's an innovation loan recipient, to talk to you about the business that he leads, the cool stuff that Callaly are doing, and hopefully some useful and inspiring hints and tips for you on how to apply for an innovation loan. Then I'll wrap up with a couple of slides, and then there'll be some lunch opportunities for networking and probably asking the questions that you wanted to ask in the Q&A, but were too shy to, which sometimes happens. There we go. Because we're not reading out the instructions, I would really, 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 really appreciate if you could read the instructions. They're online. If you go to the Innovate UK website on gov.uk, you can click through to a guide on innovation loans, what they are and how to apply for them. You can read the general guidance around innovation loans, how they're structured, the overall summary terms and conditions. You can look at the scope and timing for this particular competition. This is the 5th and final scheduled competition in our pilot programme for innovation loans, and the guidance for applicants, the gory detail. The slide deck that I'm going through here will be made available to you after the event. The nice folks from the KTN will send it round to you, and it's pretty much all summarised there, but please read the instructions in the guidance for applicants. And if you have any questions and if you're seeking clarity around anything, please contact the nice people in Swindon. Our customer services support team, customer support service team are really good at a couple of things. One is tracking through to make sure that your question goes through to the right person, which is often me, but not always. But almost more importantly, they track me down and hunt me down and make sure that I do answer. If you leave me a voicemail or send me a LinkedIn message or tweet at me, I tend to forget those, I'm sorry. But the customer support team in Swindon are really good at tracking me down and making sure that I do answer. So if you have any questions, any need for clarification, those folks are really happy to help out on that. Question to start with. Does anybody here not know who Innovate UK are? Yay, a full house. Cool, that's good. Right, in that case, the next couple of slides are going to be fairly easy. Have people here applied for Innovate UK grant funding before? Oh, lots. Successfully? Lots, good. Excellent. Innovation loans are similar. The application process has some considerable similarities with innovation grants, but there's one really, really big difference. Innovation loans are not free money. So now we've got that one out of the way, let's talk about what we're here to talk about. So Innovate UK, we're the UK's innovation agency. Our role is to stimulate business-led innovation in order to drive productivity and growth in the UK economy. A couple of ways in which we do that. One way that's not the way that people typically think about us, but I think really, really, really important, is through networks. And through connecting people. So the Knowledge Transfer Network, who are hosting today's event and helping with it, and Emma's from the KTN, and we'll talk about the KTN, through the Enterprise Europe Network. And Kira Fitzgerald from Newable, one of the delivery partners of the Enterprise Europe Network, is on the panel. And through catapult centres, physical centres of technology and innovation, everything from future cities through to digital, through to cell and gene therapy, high-value manufacturing, offshore renewable energy, compounds, semiconductors, all sorts of really cool stuff that I simply don't understand. Fantastic national resource that I would really encourage you to use. The two networks and the catapults, please use them. What people typically think about is, oh, those nice people from Innovate UK that hand out free money. And over the past 10 years, we're really, really proud of the fact that on behalf of us as taxpayers, I'm certainly a taxpayer, you're probably entrepreneurs and not yet paying tax, or hopefully you've got good accountants who help you manage your tax affairs appropriately. We've invested, so to speak, on behalf of the taxpayer, £2.2 billion in this hardcore innovation, research and development activities. And together with the funding that you put in to those projects, that £3.75 billion is an investment in innovation, getting stuff to happen more quickly than it would do otherwise, getting things to happen that wouldn't otherwise happen. The important thing, though, is that that has added value to the economy, up to £16 billion of gross value add to the economy. So when a Chancellor is standing there or standing up in Parliament at a budget or at a spending review and thinking about how the Chancellor should be allocating funding, obviously they need to pay nurses. There are things that need to be paid for today, but there's also the potential for an investment in the future of the UK to grow the economy, and the return of up to £7.30 for every pound invested through Innovate UK in innovation, in growth in the economy, we hope helps the Chancellor figure out whether just to pay nurses today or whether also to invest in the future, and we hope there's also investment in the future. The funding that we provide is typically through projects, 11,000 of them completed over the past 10 years, carried out by 8,000 unique businesses. And that means growth in the economy through those projects, through those businesses, and the 70,000 jobs that have been created by businesses like yours, and we're proud to have helped to support that. And innovation loans are part of that. We're not trying to fix gaps in the finance market. The British Business Bank is the funded on behalf of government by government in order to do that. They're there to make sure there's an adequate supply of capital to smaller businesses through partners. Our role is to stimulate innovation. And sometimes, as I've said, we'll do that through connecting. Sometimes we'll do it through funding. In this case, we're doing it through funding that's structured as a loan. So trying to make public sector funding work harder and go further, but with the overall objective of that impact on the economy, growing the economy through your efforts. The loans that we're offering are between £100,000 and £1 million. Probably quite like to do it a little bit larger, but this is a £50 million pilot programme. We want to do about 100 loans, so on average about £500,000. And if we were to go above £1 million, not only would I be doing what the Permanent Secretary in the Department for Business told us explicitly not to do, but also we'd be having an unbalanced portfolio from a credit point of view. So for the moment, between £100,000 and £1 million. We can fund up to 100% of the eligible project costs of a later stage research and development project where there's a clear route to commercial success. And I'll explain what I mean by later stage R&D project in a minute. The important thing in this is that we can fund up to 100% of those costs. If you were applying for a grant for later stage R&D, or if you were just claiming R&D tax credits, the amount that you could claim would be smaller or would be lower in relation to the overall cost. So if you're looking for a grant, for example, through our open program, and you're looking to do a technical feasibility study or an industrial research project, so sort of proof of concept stage, you could, if you were a micro or a small business, you would receive about 70% of your costs would be covered through that grant. If it's a latest at the industrial research or the feasibility study stage. If it was an experimental development project and you were applying for that grant, you would receive a grant of up to 45% of your project costs. But it would be free. With a loan, you could borrow up to 100% of the project costs, but you pay us some interest, that rate of 3.7%, and you make repayments. And because that rate of interest is significantly below a market rate of interest for a risky technology, for a probably relatively smaller, somewhat unproven business, the market rate is, 10, 12%, plus some upfront arrangement fees, plus some monitoring fees, plus a nice back-end kicker. That differential between the market rate of interest and the rate that we're charging over the life of the loan, when discounted back to today's value, there's a significant element of subsidy there, and that subsidy is a form of state aid. So this is a state-aided instrument offered through Innovate UK's notified scheme for state aid for research and development activity, and you have a choice effectively therefore. Do you apply for R&D tax relief? Do you apply for a grant? Do you apply for a loan? Do you just do it anyway? Access equity finance, go out and find money in the debt market. Those are the sorts of choices that you offer. We believe that innovation loans are particularly suited to businesses that are undertaking really cutting-edge innovations, game-changing, disruptive technology innovation for the right sort of businesses for whom a loan is suitable, and where there's that clear route to economic growth. The loans that we offer, we call them flexible and patient, and affordable. Affordable because our interest rate is low. Dirt cheap didn't quite fit on a slide. Flexible in that the loan is structured in a way that we hope will help you with your project. So an availability period when you're drawing down, spending the money on your R&D, an extension period when you're getting into the market and commercializing when it's interest only, and then a repayment period. And we hope that that structure meets the needs of innovators such as yourselves. Patient, we could offer a loan as long as 10 years. That will be the exception, not the rule. We will look at individual proposals, we'll look at what you're suggesting to us, and we'll make an offer back to you. Typically speaking, 7 years is at the upper end of our appetite, but in exceptional circumstances we could go as long as 10 years. And it's just for small and medium-sized enterprises. We think that large businesses can borrow anywhere in the market, don't need this particular form of support. And it's for single applicants. I can't lend to a consortium because the consortium is not a legal entity. It's a group of businesses that contractually, or a group of organisations or undertakings that contractually agree to do something together. That's not something that we can lend to. So it's for single business applicants only. And I'll go into more detail on those things in a second. Where innovation loans fit in relation to grants is that we think that grant funding is really, really good in two particular circumstances. One is, and particularly for individual businesses, particularly applying through our open program, is when you're trying to find and prove a new idea. That is stupidly risky. And you entrepreneurs, technology leaders, you're looking to do stupidly risky things, and we want to stimulate that. And grant funding, we believe, particularly at feasibility study and industrial research stage, is a really good way to do that. Grant funding, we also think, is really good to shift behaviours around industries that are transforming, where whole new industries are being created, where collaboration is really, really important. Whether that's a business collaborating with the science base or with universities or with research organisations to pull new knowledge out of the science base and into your business so that it's commercialised, because that's what innovation is all about. It's not just about the research, it's about the commercialisation as well, going all the way from concept to commercialisation. That collaboration is something that takes some time and effort, and particularly when it's a smaller business working with a large business and trying to get into a new supply chain, that's challenging. So some grant funding encourages, stimulates, makes more of that happen. And that's particularly being used for collaborative research and development in the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. So the government's industrial strategy sets out areas where there are significant societal and economic challenges for the UK, indeed for the world, things like healthy ageing, where because there's a significant challenge, that represents to entrepreneurs, technology-led businesses like yours, an opportunity for growth, if you can meet that challenge or that potential customer need, and particularly for as whole industries are being transformed, to position yourself in the future value chain and supply chain. Collaboration is really important for that. So that's particularly where I see grant funding being most suited. After you've found and proven your new idea, your technology your business perhaps is somewhat de-risked. It's still really risky, but nevertheless it's somewhat de-risked, it's slightly later stage, and that's where that we believe that an innovation loan can fit, and it can continue to stimulate that innovation that's going to drive economic growth, but do so in a way that makes public sector funding work harder and go further. And we hope that makes the Chancellor happy and encourages the Chancellor to keep putting money into this particular mechanism. So who are we looking for? We really want innovative businesses that are doing really clever stuff that I don't understand because I'm not a technologist. We want businesses that are doing cutting-edge innovation. This is not just the incremental stuff, which is nice and it's really important, but where there's significant risk, significant technology and development and scaling up risk. We want businesses that are growth-oriented. If you're not looking to grow significantly, taking on a loan may not be the most suitable thing for your business to do. This is a long-term liability that you're taking on that you will have to discharge. So we want growth-oriented businesses because we want the economy to grow as well. It's for businesses that are sort of at the scale-up-y sort of stage rather than at the sort of start-up-y sort of end of things. And that sounded lots of sort-ofs and if and ishy, and there's inverted commas here on the slide, and that's deliberate. We don't have a specific definition of a startup. The Startup Loans Company does, and if you're a pure startup as an individual, the Startup Loans Company is fantastic. We don't use a particular definition of scale-up. People like the Scale Up Institute, the Enterprise Research Centre, folks at Aston University have a wonderful definition of scale-up. It's actually the definition of a high-growth firm, according to the OECD. We're not using that. We're looking for businesses for whom a loan is suitable, where there is a growth opportunity, where the technology is going to lead to growth in that business, and it's sensible to take on a loan. Risky, but nevertheless not implausible. We also want businesses that are credit constrained. So, and by that, what we mean is are businesses that are struggling to access finance on normal commercial terms for that activity at that time in this particular context. So we want you to demonstrate to us that there's a need for public sector funding. We don't want to compete with the commercial debt market. We don't want to compete with the equity market. We certainly don't want to compete with our friends over in the British Business Bank and the schemes that they're offering. We want to complement those, and our focus is on innovation. It's for a later stage research and development project at the experimental development stage, and I do have a boring slide about that in a second. And we want to see that clear route to commercial success, because without a route to commercial success, we're not going to see how you're going to be able to repay the loan, and more importantly, you won't be able to see how you're going to repay that loan, and it's your liability, so you need to be comfortable with that. And we want risk. We want risky projects. We're very happy to take on innovation risk. That's Innovate UK's role. We're prepared to take some credit risk that goes alongside that innovation risk. We don't have any appetite for operational risk. Fraud, people doing things wrongly, people borrowing the money, doing something and then swanning off and not repaying is not what we're looking for. People that, anyway. And so what are we offering? We're offering a loan, as I've said, between £100,000 and £1 million for the eligible project costs of that later stage R&D project only. That's the only thing that can be funded with this loan. We're offering a loan at a very low rate of interest, effectively covering our own cost of capital in terms of the charge from Treasury to ourselves, and a loan that has an availability period. In that period, which could last as long as 3 years, you'll be drawing down the loan quarterly in advance, doing that R&D activity, paying people, buying materials, maybe purchasing equipment, to the extent that that can be categorised as an eligible project cost, maybe some overhead. And in that period, you'll be drawing down quarterly in advance, spending the money, and paying interest at that rate of 3.7% at the end of each quarter on the amount that's drawn. Then there would be, and still part of the project if you choose to characterise it in that way, an extension period. We know from evaluation of the old SMART scheme that we used to run that had proof of market, proof of concept, development of prototype stages, we know that from that external valuation that after the development of prototype stage, it still often took up to 2 years, sometimes in some cases even further, time to get into the market, to prove the product market fit, to prove the business model, to prove the commercial model. And therefore we're offering an extension period when you would no longer be drawing down any more of the loan funding from us, probably putting in your own money, but proving and getting into the market. And that period, because we don't think you'd yet be generating full commercial revenues, that's an interest-only period. So you'd be paying interest on the amount that's outstanding on the loan, but not yet having to make repayments. And then there would be a period of up to 5 years for repayment of the loan. That would be quarterly, the same amount each quarter, principal and interest, and as I've said, could be up to 5 years. So the loan could be up to 10 years, 3 plus 2 plus 5. Typically, we're going to be looking at more like 7 years. 10 years would be the exception. It's not an unsecured loan. We do expect to take collateral. We're not going to place any value on that collateral. It's not like a mortgage where you borrow 100 from a building society because they think that your house is worth 150, and they'll do a loan to value calculation. We're looking to take security really as a defensive mechanism. So if things go horribly wrong, it gives us a seat at the table with an administrator or a liquidator. So the collateral that we would expect to take would be a fixed and floating charge over the overall assets of the company, a mortgage debenture, so that when the music stops in the event of things going horribly wrong, we have a position at the table talking to those who are working out that problem. And we also want to take a specific charge over assets purchased or IP developed with the proceeds of the loan. And the reason for that is, again, it's mainly about fraud prevention. I don't want to see phoenixing. And by that, what I mean is an organisation that perhaps has some IP or develops some IP, borrows some money from Innovate UK Loans Limited, develops it, gets something really cool, and then collapses the company. But keeps the IP in their back pocket, puts it into a new venture, and goes off and commercialises it and leaves our loan unpaid. That's naughty. So we don't want to see that happen. And by taking that specific charge over that IP, or over assets purchased with the proceeds of the loan, we hope that we can properly manage public money and do so as a responsible lender. We would expect to be a senior subordinated lender. I'm in the City of London, I can use technical terms like that, I hope. So if there is senior commercial debt from a proper standard commercial organisation already in place, maybe you have an asset financing facility or an overdraft facility, or maybe a commercial loan already, and they need to be senior secured, the most senior facility in the capital structure, we would expect to cede priority to them, so come behind them in the ranking when there's a workout and money gets distributed. So preferred creditors would come first, typically the taxman, then a senior lender, and we would come after them. We would expect to be ahead of junior lenders. And by junior lenders, I mean directors' loans, shareholder loans, convertibles, mezzanine, things that stand to benefit from the upside and that are therefore quasi-equity in nature. We think that because they're getting the upside benefit, we're not, we're only getting 3.7%, it's appropriate for us to be in the middle of that capital structure. It's also a loan where we believe that there should be covenants and appropriate covenants, and by that what we mean is that you will make promises to us throughout the period of the loan. You will promise to have a monitoring officer come and make sure that your project is progressing according to plan. You will promise to provide us with quarterly financial information so that we can make sure that your business is still on track from a financial point of view. And we will have the right to stop drawdowns if things are going horribly wrong. So if that hole is really deep and you're digging deeper and deeper and deeper and there's no way out because the project really isn't on track, then we will have the right to say, actually, let's stop at this point. And rather than funding into that ever deeper hole, making life worse and worse for you and creating more and more risk for us, we would have the right at that point to stop further drawdowns, which we think we would do in consultation with you. We will do appropriately and fairly, where we want to be a responsible lender and treat customers fairly, of course, but we think that may be an appropriate thing to do. Other covenants will be things like change of control. This is a loan for SMEs that are undertaking cool innovation activity. If your project goes off in a completely different direction, if you're acquired by a whopping great conglomerate, that's fantastic, but you would no longer be in this scheme. So in order to make sure that we can keep things on track, at that point you would need to repay the loan and then go off and have your super duper exit and acquisition. We wish you well, but you wouldn't fit within this scheme. So covenants of that nature are necessary. And there will be financial covenants, leverage ratios, liquidity ratios, the sorts of things that you would expect a lender to get you to promise to do so that the financial viability of your business remains on track. And if you breach those covenants, then we'll come and have a conversation with you about it, and hopefully we can fix those and work them out. If that isn't the case, then we'll be looking at events of default, and lawyers will get involved, which is never fun but is sometimes necessary. The summary heads of terms are in the competition guidance. Please take a look at them. They're actually in this slide deck that will get sent around to you. It's I think it's something like 167 slides. I'm not going to go through all 167. We will send them around to you. The heads of terms, the term sheet for this loan agreement is in the slide deck that will get sent around to you. It's in the guidance for applicants. If you get through to the point where you're having detailed credit analysis, then you'll be able to see our standard template loan agreement, which has been kicked around quite a lot by lawyers and by businesses now, and we think it works. So I don't expect there to be loads and loads of negotiation around that loan agreement. We think we know what it is and how it should be. But please do take a look at the heads of terms. If you have questions, talk to an expert. A lawyer is a good person to talk to when there's a legal agreement involved. This slide I'll just go through really, really quickly. These were sort of some of the questions and answers when we were first putting this together and going around the country talking to people. So we're not looking to replace grants. These are complementary to grants. It's not available for match funding for an existing project. That would be two forms of state aid for the same project, which is not permitted. But also, it's not what we want to do. We want you to be doing new things. We want you to be pushing all the way through, further onwards, towards commercialisation. We want to see commercial success. I'm quite often rude about people that I call grant junkies. and I say horrid things like, well, you just want to polish your piece of kit till it's really, really, really shiny. Go and flog the dull green one. We really want you to get towards commercial success, and we hope that loans can help with that. It's a pilot it's a pilot program. £50 million of financial transaction capital allocated to us to deliver over 2 years. This is actually the last scheduled competition in this pilot. We have up to £10 million available. It may be a bit less than that, depending on how previous competitions have gone. We have the right to over-allocate in earlier competitions. So it's quite competitive at this stage, and we're looking for really good quality applications. We hope that we might be able to find some more money down the back of the sofa, perhaps to run some more competitions in this pilot next year. I can't guarantee that we find any money down the back of the sofa. It's not my sofa, it's the UK Research and Innovation and the Department for Business sofa, so they're looking down the back of it at the moment. And I hope that we'll be able to prove through the interim evaluation that's being carried out that we've got sufficient demand, we've got robust processes, that we can make sensible credit decisions, and that we can get some early indicators of that economic impact, such that in, I'm going to say, about a year's time, when I think there may be a spending review, or I've read that there will be, then we can apply to make this a full-scale programme with oodles of dosh to, that's not a technical term, in order to really make this a long-term feature of Innovate UK's mechanisms. It's run separately, discreetly. It's not the same as our core competitions around our open programme, the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund and other cool things that we do, so it's quite separate. It's not free money. We want you to be successful, but it's not contingent upon success. It's not, if you feel like it because you've done reasonably well, then you might repay. This is a loan to your business. You are required to repay. And if you don't, then there will be legal recourse. I've talked about the terms. We believe they're beneficial and therefore a form of state aid. Talked about collateral. One thing I didn't mention in the collateral is that whilst it's not secured, we will not be looking to take personal guarantees from directors. We know that you hate that. And we don't think that as a government-backed organisation seeking to stimulate innovation, we don't think that personal guarantees are appropriate. It's for single, small and medium-sized enterprises. Please check the definition. It's not just how many employees you got, it's more complex than that, so please do read the instructions. It's not for sole traders. We don't want to get into the Consumer Credit Act, and besides, the Startup Loans Company is there for individuals looking to start businesses. It's not for large companies, they're fine. It's not for universities, they're weird and wonderful and have their own forms of funding. And it's not for collaboration. We have collaborative research and development projects for collaboration. It's competitive. So it's a batch process in order that you can submit an application that talks about your project, that goes out to 5 technical and commercial assessors who will consider the quality of that project. Is it really innovative? Is it a really good project? Is there a good rationale for it? And Emma's going to talk more about that. So it's not always open. You can't just come to us and say, here's my proposal, or even worse, sometimes, here's my slide deck, what do you think? We have a boring process. It's a boring process because we want to be rigorous, we want to be fair about the way in which we judge the quality of innovation. It's not for any purpose. It has to be for the eligible project cost of a later stage research and development project with a clear route to commercial success. Clearly I've said that a few times. And it's not for the easy stuff. We want cool stuff, difficult stuff, risky stuff. It's for borrowers who typically are looking to scale. That doesn't mean to say we will say no to pre-revenue businesses. If you can demonstrate that you have, for example, suitable capital to be able to take on an innovation loan, then we will consider that. But it's not really for a straightforward, out-and-out, undercapitalized startup that's got no evidence of traction. We're looking for a bit more than that. And typically, if you're at that startup stage, you really need equity. And we would encourage you to get that. And it's for businesses that need public support, that can demonstrate that there's a good reason for the taxpayer to provide this funding on beneficial terms rather than you doing it yourselves or going into the commercial market. If you can get a loan from a commercial lender, then we really encourage you to do that. It's a good thing to do. The British Business Bank has schemes like the Enterprise Finance Guarantee. It works with the Help to Grow programme. Around the country, there are things like the Midlands Engine Investment Fund, the Northern Powerhouse Investment Fund, the Cornwall and Isles of Scilly Fund. There are schemes in Wales, in Northern Ireland, in Scotland that support access to finance. Please look at those, try and use those. If it's the innovation that's getting in the way of you using those, then maybe this is the sort of product for you. The way in which it works is, actually the market testing and roadshows were a year ago. The competition is currently open, it's live at the moment. I've got a slide at the end that talks about the deadlines, but 21st of November at noon, not a minute or a second later, is the application point. We're doing this briefing event, it's part of a series, and this webinar will be recorded and made available for those who want to play it back and hear it again later, or maybe who've missed this opportunity. You submit an application to us covering the project and your business. We will look at it to see whether it's a highly innovative project and a not implausible credit story. If it's innovative and not implausible, then we will go through and enter into detailed credit assessment, kick the tyres properly, ask about stress testing, meet the management team, and then maybe make a loan offer to potentially successful applicants. There will be terms and conditions there. There will almost certainly be conditions precedent to be met, which might include something as simple as we want to see a management presentation and actually meet the people. It may be you need to do something first, maybe close that equity round and show that you've got adequate capital and then start drawing down on the loan. Once those conditions have been met, then the drawdown period starts, so that project availability period of up to 3 years, paying interest at the end of each quarter, the extension period when you're getting into the market, interest only, and then the repayment period. And things might go wrong. As I've said, maybe the project stalls, maybe the project fails, in which case we would stop drawdown. Maybe you're struggling from a financial point of view, breaching covenants, maybe horrid things like events of default. Those things are likely to happen with some of our portfolio because we want to take risk. Maybe you'll go out of business. It will happen for some of our portfolio. If it doesn't happen for any of our portfolio, we haven't taken enough risk. If those horrid things go wrong, we will treat customers fairly, we will be a responsible lender, but we are managing public money, so we will do so in a necessarily pragmatic way. But hopefully, you'll make a ton of money doing something really, really cool and meeting customers' needs and exploiting that. And you'll grow the economy, and then we'll all be smiling. And that's the same thing, but in a flowchart. Sorry. I've got 2 slides on the objectives and the scope of this open innovation loans funding competition, but basically speaking, what we're saying is it's open. So any technology, any market, any sector, we're in London, so there's bound to be some blockchain, there's going to be some artificial intelligence, there might even be some artificial intelligence, and not just, I've got an algorithm. We'll look at things like that. I'll stop being rude. We want to see you submitting an application from any part of the economy, any sector, any technology, but with a clear route to commercial success, a proven need for public sector funding. And it does say here, including the arts, design, media, creative industries, immersive reality is cool, virtual reality is cool, and Sean, who's going to be on the panel, is bound to stress that because I know that's it's a area of priority for Sean. In scope, game-changing, disruptive, cool. And this is what we mean by a later stage R&D project. Sorry, it's a lot of words, but this is taken directly from the General Block Exemption Regulation, the state aid rules, and this defines later stage R&D. So things like prototyping, demonstrating, piloting, testing, validation, in real-life operating conditions, with users, that sort of activity. So not finding and proving an idea, but developing it, getting into the market, showing that it can happen. And from another scale that people often use are TRL scales, so technology readiness scales. So if your technology readiness level is, I don't know, sort of around sort of 5-ish, going up towards 7, maybe even 8. That's the sort of area where we're looking for, not TRL 3, which is really early stuff. Or it may be that your technology readiness level is quite high. Maybe you're at TRL 7 already. You've got a pretty good idea that your piece of kit or your platform works technologically. But your challenge might be, okay, I can make one of them in the lab, but how do I make a production facility that actually can deliver 100 of them or 1,000 of them every year to meet customers' needs at the specification, repeatably, reliably, at scale? So taking your manufacturing readiness level from, I don't know, MRL 4 or 5 up to a high level of manufacturing readiness, that may be a very good use of an innovation loan. And the other thing that we'll be looking for you to demonstrate is that you're going to be developing your commercial readiness levels. So it may be that you haven't quite figured out how much you can charge or what your business model might be in terms of revenue generation. You might have to give away a few of these just to show that the users will use them. And then you might have to sell a few of them at less than cost, at, I don't know, £1 or so, a couple of quid for one of these. Really, you want, once you're fully in the market, to be charging a tenner for them. Or you might find that you want to experiment with, actually, maybe we'll lease them. And then find out whether, and then get into that whole wonderful world of the servitization of manufacturing and come up with a pay per click. That's a slightly different way of calling pay per click rather than Google ads or anything. Those sorts of business model innovation, testing those may be a really good thing for you to be doing in that extension period. So that's what we mean by experimental development. It doesn't include routine process improvement. I'm very, very big on process improvement. I used to work at GE. In fact, I'm a Lean Six Sigma black belt for my sins. So it's a really, really good thing to do. And whilst for an R&D tax credit, you may be able to claim that if there's a scientific or technological advance included in that activity, that may be eligible for R&D tax relief. For an innovation loan, for the sort of innovation projects that we're looking for as Innovate UK, we want more cutting-edge, game-changing, radical innovation, not just process improvement. So please look closely at this. It's in the guidance for applicants. You might well send me a question saying, as a number of people have, saying, I'm doing this, does that count? And my answer will be, submit a really good proposal that's compelling, that shows that what you're doing fits this, and our assessors will look at it, and hopefully they will agree with you that this counts. And that's innovation loans in a not quite a nutshell. And I'm reasonably not too far off time. Questions. Because we're on a webinar, please could you wait until Cara, who's the latest person to join our credit specialist team, she'll come around with a microphone, and if you could speak into the microphone, then those on the webinar will be able to hear your question as well. Q&A. Gentleman in the middle. Sorry, it was the gentleman behind you, and then you can come next, and Cara's going to give you the microphone.
Hi there, good morning. My name is Paul Lopez Salcedo. I have a company called King's Access Technology. We make products for people with visual impairments, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and also the aging community, which was very nice. It's small electronics. We have about 5 products in development, one of which is quite significant, one of which is medium, and 3 is small. For an application such as this, should we base it around one of the large projects, or should we base it around all of them? Because they're parallel hardware and software developments.
It's up to you.
Perfect answer.
Sorry, that's for you to choose.
Okay. There's no restrictions on single project. It's more as opposed to an overall project.
You need to define a project. So a discrete set of activities with work packages. That might be dealing with piece A, piece B, and piece B. It might just be piece, I got lost with my alphabet there. It might be 1, 2, and 3. It might be just 2. That's up to you to choose and to put forward a compelling application. I can't advise you on that. That's, you need to decide that for how your business is going to grow and how this might help you succeed.
Okay, but from the Innovate UK point of view, there's no restriction to what may be defined as a single project. We can have an overall project which is multiple developments.
If you put it in a convincing, compelling way that shows that it all fits together nicely, and our assessors agree with you, then that's great.
Okay, so not in a rubbish, uncompelling, boring way.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks. Yes.
Hi there, good morning. Nick Huber here of Protein Logic. I've got a question about the commercial extension. You said there is the extension period.
An extension period, yes.
So
pre-commercial.
Pre-commercial.
Yes.
So part of what we would be applying for, well, what we're applying for is to commercialize our IP more or less, especially
Hopefully
in
more.
Yeah, there is some development as well, but primarily to get out there and find the right partner to work with us to understand exactly how our IP would apply, and also what the business model would be for it to then, take over the market. So is that the part where we understand the exact business model with that partner, is that an extension period beyond what is in the scope of this grant, or do we
It's
have
not
to
a
build
grant,
that in?
it's a loan.
Sorry,
Sorry,
the loan, sorry.
To pick you up on that one. It's up to you to put a proposal to us that characterises the nature of the activity that you're going to be doing and that fits within that definition of experimental development. Mm-hmm. If what you're looking for is to borrow money to go out and do sales and marketing and commercial activity, then it would be out of scope. If what you're doing is final development of your IP and then exploring and proving that business model,
exactly,
then that should well, I believe, be within the scope. You need to put it across in a really compelling way. Business model innovation is really cool. I find it personally fascinating. It's hard to get our assessors to get it. It's often easier for people to see, oh, here's a widget and it's going to be, I'm inventing and developing and then commercializing, or producing and then commercializing a widget or a platform. If I'm exploring the business model, it's often harder to characterize. So listen carefully to what Emma's going to say later on around how best to commercialize that. But I think providing it's not commercial activity, then it should be fine. I think there was lady here, and I think over there, and then round at the back.
Rebecca Reynolds. I represent the health software startup, so they already developed product. They need some additional funding for testing on real clients and to gain an IP. So it looks like pretty much fits within, because they've been developing up for 2 years, so it's difficult to gain additional funding for that specific stage of testing. In terms of security, you mentioned collateral. IP, some of the funding requested, and maybe the other ways of getting it, is for gaining IP. So you taking IP as kind of part of your collateral secure the risk. So would it be agreement so that if we gain IP, because it takes some time to gain, it may take up to 2 years in some cases. So it will be agreement. So once the IP is gained, so if it's not in place yet, it's still counted as a part of your collateral process. Yeah?
Yes. So the way it would work is where we're looking to take specific security over IP developed with the proceeds of the loan. In the loan agreement, it will state that by the end of the availability period, IP that has been developed in that period using the proceeds of the loan would at that point be registered, or there would be a charge over it in favour of Innovate UK Loans Limited. So it won't happen on day one because you wouldn't have developed it, but by the end of the project you will have done, and at that point you would there would be so it would be a condition subsequent. It would be an obligation within the loan agreement.
So that would be reasonable enough for, in terms of collateral, because for software company to get any other...
No, absolutely. So when this is not a collateral-based loan. Okay. We're not doing a loan-to-value calculation in the way in which a commercial lender might. We're not looking to take land and buildings, etc. However, we do want to take security. We will attribute a value of 0 to that security, but that doesn't mean to say we don't want to have security over it. It's collateral, but it's not a collateral-based calculation. We're looking at the future cash flows of the business in order to make our credit determination.
Do we need to mention it in our application?
Absolutely,
or specific,
yes, please.
Okay, so, or there's specific instruction on that?
It's in the guidance for applicants, absolutely. Yes.
Hello. I was wondering if I had to press the button. My name is Alan McGill. I'm chairman of Watch Over Me. We're producing next generation mobile phones, wearable phones. I'm wearing one. We'll sell 18 million by 2022, and the phone will outperform Apple's watch phone, for example. What I'd like to know is, where is the legal detail of what reasonable collateralization means? I know you've mentioned a bit about
IP. It's in the summary
IP.
heads of terms in the guidance for applicants.
It's actually written down.
Sorry?
The terms are actually defined specifically.
In the summary heads of terms.
Brilliant. One other question. If we don't need the money halfway through, can we give it back again?
Absolutely. There's no prepayment penalty.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks. Cara's in control here with the microphone, so she's choosing who the next question's coming from.
I've got the microphone, so shall I talk?
That's the clue.
A couple of questions. One is to do with the R&D tax credits. So are you saying that if we have one of your loans that we can't claim R&D tax credits?
You should speak to an expert from a tax, legal, accounting point of view. I'm not allowed to offer advice on R&D, on tax, or anything like that. However, my understanding of the situation is that R&D tax credits, so R&D tax relief at a small company rate, is a form of state aid. An innovation loan is a form of state aid. You cannot have two forms of state aid for the same project. You may be able to claim R&D tax relief at the large company rate, so-called RDEC, because that's not a form of state aid, but I would strongly encourage you to talk to a tax expert, a specialist R&D tax person, in order to get proper confirmation, or talk to HMRC, or look at the HMRC website where there is further guidance. I hope I answered your question.
Well,
didn't give you advice.
There's more work
said
to
the
do
right
to
thing.
find out the answer, but yeah, thank you for that. And the other question is to do, when we declare the amount of loan, and when you do your due diligence on the business, is there a situation where you would maybe up the loan or change the loan amount, because in terms of what we're asking for, in terms of
yes,
after you've done the assessment?
we might do that. We might, you may make a proposal to us, we may make an offer to you that might be different. So in one case, in one of the first loans that we offered, the business that was undertaking this project had overall project costs of £1 million to do what they were looking to do. And they were looking for a loan from Innovate UK of £500,000. And they were raising some money from elsewhere to fund the other half. And we had a management meeting with this particular company, and what was very clear was that in order to be as successful as they wanted to be, to meet their ambitions, they really needed to invest more in their sales and marketing and business development capability. We looked at the numbers, they looked at the numbers, their shareholders looked at the numbers, and we said, rather than spending £1 million, borrowing £500,000, putting in £500,000 of your own resources, why don't you borrow 600,000 from Innovate UK? It's still within all the thresholds. That enables you to put in 400,000 of your own money, and the extra 100,000, go out and hire more business development, sales, marketing-oriented people, because that will help you with your growth ambition. And everybody ended up, we looked carefully at it, they looked carefully at it, and that was ended up being what they chose to do. We've had other circumstances where people have said to us, we'd like a loan for, 8 years, that includes a 5-year repayment period. And in order to show that they were suitable from a credit point of view, they showed us their future forecast financials, and they were, not uncommonly, showing a fantastic hockey stick. I mean, they were going to be making gazillions by year 3 of the repayment period. And we said, if you're going to be making that much money, you don't need to borrow money or have a repayment period of 5 years. So we're going to offer you a loan that has a 3-year repayment period, because that's what we believe is suitable according to the cash flows that you have presented to us and that we have diligenced and we believe are suitable. And they went, okay, fine. So yes, we may make a different offer to the proposal that we've received, but the project will remain the project, because that's been looked at by our technical and commercial assessors. Thank you. Who's got
Thank
the
you.
microphone
Carlos
there?
de Poms from a company called Algaceuticals. Apologies for turning up late, so maybe you've already addressed this in your talk earlier on. We grow microalgae to extract high-value chemicals. We developed the technology here in the UK. We've applied to UK Innovate for a grant to further develop our technology, but despite that, we're ready to deploy now. Would applying for a grant for developing a little bit of technology to super accelerate what we're doing exclude us from also applying for an innovation loan?
If the two projects are separate, then that would be okay. If you have adequate resources to be able to deliver both projects, then we would consider it. But they would have to be separate projects. If it's two forms of state-aided funding for the same thing, the answer to that would be no, it's not possible.
Thank you.
That's okay.
Hi, Richard Bradshaw from Crest Systems. I'm interested in the timing of the competition, the timing of an offer letter or an offer, and then the timing of the project starting.
Okay, so registration closes on the 14th of November at noon. Applications have to be in by the 21st of November at noon. We will get back to people with a notification of whether or not they will be taken forward for detailed credit analysis on the 11th of January 2019. How long it takes between start of detailed credit analysis and an offer it will vary according to the responsiveness of the business, how difficult the questions are, blah, 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 blah. So it could be anything from days to weeks, hopefully not months. We would love it if drawdowns were to commence in February or March of 2019, particularly before the 31st of March, because that helps us from a budget and spend point of view when we're reporting back to UK Research and Innovation and the Department for Business and Treasury. But it's really what your business needs at that point. We're not particularly inclined to say, okay, we'll agree everything and then start the project in 9 months' time, because we're quite motivated to get stuff out of the door. So we've said in the competition brief and in the guidance that we expect projects probably to start around March.
Okay, that helps. I'll give a follow-on question, if that's okay, related. So a project that started in Q2 of 2019 would be on the edge.
Yeah, it should be okay. Yeah, I prefer to get the money out the door before the end of the financial year, but it's what matters for your business.
Yeah, understood. It's just sometimes projects and financing don't always line up.
Yeah, fair enough.
There's a third and last question.
Right.
So does that mean then interest is payable from the offer, except when the offer, when all the deals done,
interest will start
payable
to accrue from drawdown. You're borrowing interest. You're paying interest on the money that you have borrowed
from the drawdown point. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This person and then this gentleman first.
Do I need to press it? Morning. My name is Ilya Lubensky. I represent CareTech Medical, which is a pregnancy support platform. Wanted to ask you, Innovate UK, how much UK-centric you want to be in this? We have global aspirations. We are going to start, we start already with UK, but in terms of actual implementation, in terms of using outside resources, subcontractors, do you have requirements or maybe sort of preference for more UK-centric projects?
Certainly a preference. We don't want to say that it's a categorical requirement because that might breach the Treaty of Rome, and I don't want to do that. There's enough people questioning that whole bigger things than us. What we would invite you to do is, in your application, to submit a really clear, compelling justification of why a particular form of a group of subcontractors might be necessary, why they're based wherever they are. If it's just, I'm going to listen to the fire drill.
Attention, please.
Sorry.
Attention, please. The fire alarm is about to be tested. Please take no action.
So a good, compelling rationale is what we're looking for. And yeah, I mean, it's UK taxpayers' money. We want... Oh, that's cool. I like that. That's great. That's the best fire alarm I've heard in a long time. There's no sense of panic in that at all, is there?
This is an emergency. Please leave the building by the nearest available exit.
And she has a really soothing voice as well. You're all going to die, but don't worry. It's nice. Anyway, oh, and more. Come on. You guys want to? I'm bringing the panel up because I'm eating into their time at the moment. So it's UK taxpayers' money. Our preference is always to see economic growth in the UK, and if the money's sort of leaking out and all of it's being spent in, I don't know, the Cayman Islands, nice place to live. I used to live there. Then we're going to be less keen on that. Okay. I think we have probably. The lady here quickly, and then one more question at the back, and then we'll get to the panel, unless Bruce has any cool questions from online.
Just a quick question regarding the deadlines. So we have a testing project agreed around January, February, and in terms of deadlines, on 11th you decide to, as potential grant loan, but then you do basically credit analysis to understand how much we can get. So effectively, we can know by 11th that we have a chance, and we just don't know how much. So we may have like a bridge loan up to the time.
We don't do bridging loans.
Yeah, but it's up to us to arrange. But at least by 11th, we would know that Innovate UK will provide funding.
Yes. One thing I would stress, and it's not quite within your question, but I'll say it anyway. When we say a defined project and the eligible project costs incurred before the formal project start date, which would be the start of drawdowns, are not eligible project costs. So you couldn't borrow money from, I don't know, down the back of the sofa, your granny, whoever, do some of the work, then borrow money from us and pay for the work that's already started. That would not be permissible. That's not in the definition of an eligible project cost that's set out in the state aid regulations.
So if we have a project starting in February, so that because that's why I want you to understand deadlines, because we have agreement with already, real clients to test it around February. Mm-hmm. So would it be visible or?
Tight.
But we still will be within our application, that kind of criteria. That's what I'm just trying to understand.
It wouldn't be impossible if everything lines up really neatly. If you provide us all the information, if it's all nice and clear cut, then it may be feasible. Okay. We could certainly work hard to do that, but I can't guarantee how long the credit analysis will take.
So would you be advising just to kind of be on the safe side to provide the deadlines for projects within specific time?
I'm not permitted to advise, but I'm only allowed to clarify. But it sounds to me as though that's quite tight. And if there were flexibility in your project's start date, making it a few weeks later might be prudent.
So much time is more visible, I guess. That's what you say, because
we could perhaps talk in the break because it's quite specific. So I think the last question of the person who has the mic, and then Bruce is going to answer questions, and we will get to the important panel.
Hi, Adam from Switchy. Are you able to share with us any information about the percentage of projects that met the eligibility criteria that actually got funded in the last 3 rounds?
Yeah. So in the first competition, we had 47 applications. I think 20% of those were ineligible because they'd either not completed all the documentation or were outside of the scope of that particular competition, which did have a narrow scope. That resulted, we made 7 or 8 loan offers. 7 of them, I believe, are now drawing down. One has some conditions still to meet. Not convinced they're going to get there, but they've got a couple of weeks still to do that. And we committed £8.8 million in that competition, so slightly below our target of 10. Second competition, which was around manufacturing materials, manufacturing readiness, we had 38 applications, I think, or thereabouts, and made loan offers to, I think it's about a dozen. loan offers, 11 million I think we've committed there, or conditionally committed there. The third competition, which was the first open competition, we had, I believe it was 103 applications, or maybe it was even slightly more than that. Again, about 20% of them were ineligible simply because they hadn't completed all the forms, which really irritated me because a lot of people wasted their time, which is a shame. We're working that through. Our guess is that I think we took through 24 cases for detailed credit assessment, and my guess is that we're going to make probably a dozen or so loan offers. We've just completed competition 4, which was the second open competition. Again, about 100 applications. I sent out an email to everybody that had registered and said, don't forget that you have to complete these documents and submit them, upload them by the relevant time. Still 10-15% were incomplete, which was disappointing. We've just had our progress panel where we looked at the innovation quality and the initial credit plausibility and plausibility test, and we've taken through 33 for detailed credit analysis. Generally speaking, once we get into the detailed credit analysis stage, there's about a 70 to 80% hit rate in terms of our credit committee, of which I'm a member, choosing to make a loan offer. We have up to £50 million to commit. We've committed certainly about 30 at the moment. We've got one competition that we're just going through the decision-making process, and there's this competition, so it's getting to the point where we're maybe having to consider rationing in terms of the most highly innovative, the most suitable, fitting within a portfolio, and we can't go beyond 50 in terms of commitment. So far, everybody that we've wanted to lend to, we've been able to lend to. It's getting more competitive.
Yeah. Just very quickly, I understand you've got some quite strict criteria around the percentage of losses that the business kind of suffered versus
I will come to that.
Equity.
I will come to the
funding.
undertaking and difficulty test later.
Okay.
But yes, there are. It's not that we have. The European Commission in the state aid rules has. We also look at things from a credit point of view, but the undertaking and difficulty I will get to. I've got a specific slide that is got lots of words and numbers on that I'd like you all to take note of.
Brilliant.
So I'll come back to that if that's okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bruce, anything burning online before we have no time left for the panel?
Yeah, there's just a couple that I probably didn't feel I could answer easily online, and one of them relates to that state aid, the contribution and R&D tax credits, and maybe how somebody should go around looking at that and evaluating that, apart from getting professional advice.
R&D tax credits, I would say, take professional advice.
Yeah.
Accountants, lawyers, experts, there are lots of people who make a living out of giving advice around R&D tax relief. Check around, find the right one, and get some good professional advice, particularly if they've got a professional indemnity policy that you can claim against if the advice was really rubbish. I haven't got one, so I'm not allowed to offer advice.
Yeah, and the other one really, which I don't think you talked about too much, is in terms of scheduling the repayment and where the flexibility lies around that. So when they set the schedule of repayments, how that's managed and the flexibility.
Quarterly, same amount each quarter throughout the repayment period.
Okay.
So the idea of racking it all up in a balloon or bullet repayment at the end, no. Quarterly, set amount, same amount each quarter throughout the repayment period.
Thanks.
Okay. Right, if there are more questions, grab me at the break, or we will certainly be around for networking afterwards, but I don't want to lose the opportunity to get these cool folks. Let's talk at the break, please. Super duper panel. Please talk into the microphone so that people on webcast can hear you. And I really have, I really have a slide. I basically have a single question for each of you, and if you would be really kind and say who you are, where you're from, and then perhaps in your answer you'll be able to give your standard as to why you're here on the panel. That was the first time we did this. That was my first question. Why are you here? So what should people be thinking about when they're seeking to grow, particularly through innovation? So I will let's start with Sarah from Grant Thornton. We've worked a lot together in the past. If you could explain who you are, where you're from, what sort of things you offer, and then what should people be thinking about? And then we'll then Kira, then Haley, then finish up with Sean. How's that?
Sure, no problem. Morning, everyone. So my name's Sarah Abrahams. I head up the growth finance practice at Grant Thornton UK. For those of you that aren't familiar with Grant Thornton, we're the 5th largest accountancy firm in the world. So we have a number of sort of technical services related to accounting and tax, but I sit on the advisory side of the business, fortunately. So I'm not an accountant, I'm a corporate financier. And spend my time helping companies that are looking to fundraise up to 10 million, prepare their documents, understand what that landscape looks like, and then connect them with suitable investors and help them close that funding. So we're working with companies that are looking for seed investment, so perhaps their first £100,000 to sort of help them get to commercialisation, and a lot of companies that we work with will be taking advantage of some of the fantastic grants and loans that we've heard about this morning, right through to later stage companies that are already generating revenue but are growing and perhaps need to build a new factory or hire more people or are expanding overseas. So the one thing they have in common is they're growth ambitious and they need funding to achieve their business plans. So in terms of what companies should be thinking about, what was the question again? Just remind me.
What should they think about in terms of the financing growth, particularly through innovation? What are the constraints? Where should they be looking for help?
Yeah, no problem.
What are the big issues that they ought to consider?
So I mean, the biggest challenge in raising funding is that there are a plethora of options out there, and over the last 10 years in particular, it's become the funding landscape and the options that are available have increased, so that's really good news. There's lots of money out there. The fundamentals of raising money haven't changed, so there's still competition amongst businesses to secure that funding, and in parallel to more funding options, we also have more business incorporations on record, so it's popular and it's encouraged for people to start their own businesses. So there's competition both amongst people looking for funding and people wanting to deploy that funding. So as a business, when you are going out to seek investment, it's important to make sure that you know what your strengths are and how you can stand out to the people that will be considering your investment opportunity, and not waste time talking to different investment groups that are just not relevant for the stage that you're at. So there are a number of groups, because it is more competitive, particularly among later stage funders. There are a number of groups that like to keep an eye out, keep an ear to the ground for new, upcoming, disruptive, innovative businesses, and they'll be happy to have a coffee and happy to have a chat, but you're not suitable for their investment criteria. And so whilst those conversations are great and it's good to get on their radar, you're wasting time when you should be talking to people that are actually interested in the stage that you're at. So the more that you can surround yourself with people that understand this landscape and know what options are right for you at the stage that you're at, and can help stress test a lot of your business plan assumptions, can give a third-party review on what you're putting down on paper. People that have experience looking at business plans and can just sort of help you really make your opportunity shine. And I can't recommend that enough. And surround yourself talking to people that have been there and raised funding before as well. So reach out to entrepreneurs and hear what it's like, what surprised them about the process, and what, one or two tips they would give to you going about this for the very first time. There are a lot of resources out there, and you may find that there are people that are recommending that you pay for advice. It's worth sort of thinking about the cost of time versus your own time, basically, and what that time lost cost would be. It can be a great investment to make sure that you get the goal that you need to quicker.
Thank you. So Kira, from your perspective, Newable does a lot of things, including delivery around the Enterprise Europe network. So how might a firm like yours interact with businesses and help them when they're doing cool, innovative stuff that I don't understand?
Yeah, morning everyone. So, as Nigel said, my name's Ciara Fitzgerald and I work with Newable here in London, and we deliver a number of government contracts, one of them being Enterprise Europe Network. For any of you who are not aware of it, it's a European Commission initiative but is co-funded by Innovate UK. It is actually the largest support network for SMEs. So we are here, all our services are free of charge to businesses within the regions. It's actually a worldwide network. So the core offering is to help companies to commercialize and internationalize. So in doing that, we actually support on a one-to-one basis businesses, like helping them to going through their business models, helping them access funding and finance, and also helping them to internationalize. We do that through a number of different kind of sub-programs. One of them I feel which would be very relevant for the audience here today would be the Innovate to Succeed program, which is a tailored support offering to address your needs to help you bring a new product or service to market. So the advisors that work on my team would work with you to help you, I suppose, address where you are currently with your business, kind of what's the goal and what's the future plans, and then help you along that journey to success. So maybe helping you identifying relevant funding or finance offerings. So we would be able to help you in applying for kind of reviewing your innovation loan application, for instance, or a grant application loan. We won't write it for you, but we will review it for you and work with you on that. Again, helping you maybe going forward for any other forms of private investment as well. We offer that one-to-one service to you. I suppose one thing to note, kind of what companies really should be aware of, is really be clear about what you need funding and finance for. A lot of companies come to us, they're looking for money, but they're not really 100% sure on like what you're using that finance for. It makes a huge impact on what schemes you might be eligible for, and also the timelines. You mentioned it already today, but that's very important. Kind of where does this fit in with your overall kind of the journey for the growth of the business. So I'm also here with another colleague today. Adrian's here. He's over there. So we're here to support all businesses who are looking to grow, to commercialize, and to internationalize.
Thank you. And Newable now also manages an angel network.
Yes. So formerly London Business Angels, Newable now acquired. They're now known as Newable Private Investing. So within Newable itself, I sit on the advice department, but we also have the private investing and also another form of loans department. So within Newable, there's quite a kind of a one-stop shop. We also, on the Department of International Trade, we also deliver that contract. So we're able to kind of support the clients throughout with a number of different offerings along that journey.
Thank you. I had said Henry then Sean, but do you mind if I swap that round and come to Henry last, because I'm going to ask you a slightly different question, if I may. So Sean, firstly, thank you for bringing along copies of the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales Corporate Financier magazine, because there's an article in there on innovation loans. So thank you very much indeed, both for featuring this programme and bringing the magazines along. From your perspective, Sean, as an institute with a lot of professional service providers within both the institute and your faculty, how do you feel that what do you think is the best way for innovative businesses, entrepreneurs such as in the audience and online today to interact with professional advice in order to ensure that know how to find all their best options for financing growth through innovation?
Yeah, I think, I'm sort of well used to meeting audiences like this who've got a lot of expertise in, as technologists, as engineers, as scientists, and in the digital realm. And I think the first bit of advice I would give is that when you start moving from being technologists or engineers and moving your technology or your product into becoming a business, think of it as a process. Think of it as an open-ended process, and there'll be many steps along that process. And therefore, even if you're at a very early stage of proof of concept and that kind of thing, develop a sort of growth plan for where you'd like to go, albeit with different options in it around which you might pivot. But work on that as a process, and I think then the type of expert advice you get will sort of fall into place. And there are many different kinds of expert advice according to what point of that process you're in. And we've already heard about the sort of excellent advice and help that Newable provides at quite early stage. There's the knowledge transfer network, who are colleagues of Nigel's, and there's a lot of great business support and advice there. And then as you move on in sophistication and finance, you might turn to the likes of Sarah and her colleagues, who are growth finance specialists and corporate finance specialists, who are going to really help you to scale up. So if you think about it as a process, then where loans come in relation to raising equity, grants and these kind of things, also starts to make sense in terms of what kind of finance is appropriate. And to help you as well, another bit of free advice, we produce a business finance guide with the likes of the British Business Bank and Innovate UK. That's free, that's online, there's a lot of information there, and again it helps you think of this as a process and how you're going to create a growth plan.
Thank you. And the corporate finance faculty, the institute, is also doing interesting work with perhaps slightly outside of the scope of innovation loans, but around aspects of the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. Would you like to quickly give a 1-minute overview of the good work you guys are doing there?
Oh, want the industrial strategy in 1 minute? No, I think.
No, I didn't mean the industrial strategy in 1 minute.
Yes, I think the gist is that there's also there is a big push by the government to back some of the most important emerging technologies, ranging right from AI and robotics to life sciences. There is something, I think, various estimates, there's something like about £1.5 billion of new money coming into there through the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. We're part of my job, as well as to talking to people who are in business and entrepreneurs and technologists, is also we work quite closely with the government in terms of encouraging even more public and private investment in some of these technologies, such as immersive technologies, which Nigel mentioned, which I'm heavily involved in, and which is fun, and things like artificial intelligence, which is hard work.
Okay, thank you. So last but not least, Henry, you're the man with the data, aren't you?
Yes.
Where do you see, from the data that you have, where do you see funding coming from in the recent past around growth through innovation? And so where might things like innovation loans fit within that landscape?
Yeah, sure. So a little bit about Bohurst. We track high growth companies in the UK. We track probably a lot of the people in the room. We're looking at your companies and how you are financing your growth, and what that growth means for your businesses and within various sectors. So we look at grants, we look at equity, we look at debt. We're looking at all of those, and we sort of start to see the levels. I'll slightly echo Sarah's point that we've seen a real shift in the past couple of years, and indeed the fact that we're here, this is a pilot scheme. There are new types of finance available to businesses like yours. When we started 10 years ago, primarily it was equity. If you wanted to see an interesting high technology, high growth business, you'd look at the ones that were raising equity. So we used to just look at those levels as that's sort of the barometer of what's happening on the high growth landscape in this country. That doesn't quite work anymore because there are so many more support mechanisms available, both in sort of the hard and the soft ones that have been mentioned here as well. So there are grants, there are innovation loans, there's venture debt, there are accelerators, more and more accelerators sort of opening every month, which replace some of the funding requirements, particularly if they come with office space and things like that. So just looking at money raised from external investors doesn't quite work. That's quite good, because if we look at the levels for 2018, it actually looks like equity investment is falling. So if we were using that just as our barometer, things wouldn't necessarily look that good for the UK. But in its place, we're seeing venture debt climbing. So it looks like 2018 is going to be a record year for the amount of venture debt going to private UK businesses. As I say, the number of companies being supported by accelerators is at the highest level it's ever been, and will probably be even higher in 2019. So that's sort of the advice is there are a huge number of options. I mean, you're all probably slightly on board with that already, hence why you're here looking at innovation loans. But there are lots of other mechanisms out there as well to support your growth from the financial point of view.
Thank you. And one of the things that I've often pontificated about, was that one of the big challenges in the UK is that through mechanisms like Seed Enterprise Investment Scheme, Enterprise Investment Scheme, tax reliefs to encourage early stage equity investment, because there are good angel networks, there are good early stage equity investors, getting seed funding for a difficult idea is relatively doable. At the other end of the scale, getting significant growth capital from even into the stage of an acquisition through a private equity firm, or a listing on AIM, or money through someone like the Business Growth Fund, which is probably the biggest growth investor. That late stage equity is doable. In the middle, it's hard. The sort of the £5 million raise is particularly difficult in the UK, particularly for unsexy areas of technology and innovation. Is that just my prejudiced anecdotal view, or what is the data that you see tell us about that?
I think what's really happening there is various investors are moving up and down the value chain quite a lot at the moment. So you're seeing less sort of rigorous adherence, with a few exceptions, particularly at the later stage. A growth fund will do only later stage deals. A lot of other investors are sort of moving up and down, and sort of as what garners their attention. So they will say that we only do rounds of this size, and suddenly you see them operating at the seed stage in a kind of transaction that they said they didn't do, because they've been approached by the company. So there's a lot of sort of moving up and down. There are various reasons for that. One of the other trends we've noticed is, and one thing to recommend to you guys if you're looking at equity investment, is the increasing prominence of non-domestically headquartered investors. That's becoming more and more of a thing. The levels of investment from US headquartered funds is climbing and climbing each year. And that's having a sort of knock-on effect on where investors see themselves within the sort of chain of investors, because the US investors come over with much larger investment sizes at different valuations, and so there's a lot of flux in the market at the moment. So I think maybe the bit of advice is, if you're struggling at that middle bit, is don't necessarily fully trust what people say they invest in at the moment. If they say we're only looking at 10 million ticket sizes, you only need 5. It may still be worth the conversation, although that slightly flies in the face of Sarah's advice of against wasting your time. There's a balance to be struck, because there is a sort of bit of movement in what people are looking at in their investment theses at the moment.
Okay. Thank you. And I guess a question for any or all of you, is the market too frothy at the moment from an equity point of view? Has the advent of equity crowdfunding, has the VC's obsession with AI and blockchain meant that actually equity valuations are too high at the moment, and that's storing up trouble for future down rounds and people getting locked in and not being able to go forward? Or am I just dreaming that the market's overvalued? because I'm naturally sceptical.
I can take it. The partly what's happening there is the frothiest stuff is what gets talked about the most. You're right about crowdfunding. If we look at the data, you are statistically more likely to get a higher valuation than a sort of directly comparable business not raising through crowdfunding. That's because you can, a single VC will negotiate harder against you than a group of 1,000 retail investors. That's just the way it goes. But there are downsides that you trade off for that higher valuation. The US influence is a factor again. It's actually very complicated because US companies structure their shares differently, and so although there's the higher valuation in a US company, what the investor gets for that is often slightly more. They get slightly more preference. We use preference shares over here. They're slightly more preferential in the US. That makes sense to say. So that's sort of driving it, and then those valuations get just transplanted over here. So that feels like a sort of inflation on the value. But as I say, you can sort of trust that a little bit too much because it is the largest deals that get talked about. So you see the outside of the bubble or the peak of the mountain rather than what's happening underneath, which is a bit more sensible.
Okay. Sean, what you were going to say?
It's okay, you go first.
Okay, I mean, I think that there are different. Again, I think there are different parts of the market, and I think equity crowdfunding has been a sort of fairly frothy, very speculative sort of part of the market. I think if you move into things like that as a startup, then do it with your eyes open and be prepared for it to be sort of quite a racy ride. I think to your point, Nigel, about where you're building something substantial in terms of starting to raise a few or several £1 million, that's where there tends to be a sort of real mix. If you can demonstrate that you have a large potential addressable market that is genuinely global, then I think you get attention from VCs and institutional investors from all over the world, which is what Henry was saying. I think what they're looking for, though, is that global potential. Whether that global potential is you doing it yourself and building that market, whether it's through licensing agreements and those sort of commercial agreements, or whether it's through M&A eventually, that gets people very, very interested. And that's where I would say this, of course, that's where you want to start getting some sophisticated advice from the likes of Sarah and her colleagues.
Yeah, I would just add to the sort of comment around where the funding gaps might be if they are in the market and where it's slightly more challenging. And for us, and obviously I can only comment on the transactions that we're involved in, whereas Henry has the data, and the conversations that we have with funds, it is relatively easy to raise at sort of seed stage when you're just getting started because of the reliefs available. But it's sort of when you get to late stage seed, which is really the step before you might do your big Series A round, where perhaps you haven't achieved the forecasts that you said you would in your earlier rounds, and there is just a step round before you get there. And your existing investors can potentially put some money in to support, but you do need some additional funding to come in alongside. And I think, that's where you're wanting incremental uplifts in valuation, but you sort of can't have too high an uplift, because then when you come to do your Series A, your valuation will get scrutinised quite heavily by VC funds when they're looking at it. So I think there's sort of an emerging gap around that end, and we're seeing with VCT funds in particular, so venture capital trusts, which are funds that operate very similarly to EIS funds. We're seeing that they find it less appealing to write checks for sort of 1 to 2 million at the moment, and they want to be doing bigger checks because it's just the same amount of work for them, and some of them are sat on sort of $500 million of funds that they need to get out the door, and they want to be doing slightly larger checks. But from a valuation perspective, that can make it quite tricky if you're not far enough advanced that they can make that work from a return perspective. And there are some VCT funds, because they're operating within a fund structure and they have guaranteed returns that they have to deliver to their investors. There's one fund in particular that values companies on 2 times next year's revenue for any sector, and that's the only way that they will look at valuation. 2 times next year revenue, whether you're a retail business, whether you're a really high-tech, interesting software business. And that's just sort of how they look at things. So valuation discussions, when you get to that level of funder, is very much driven by the funder. And we find it challenging as advisors to work with entrepreneurs' valuation expectations that are really just out of line with what we're seeing in the market. And Henry's right. I mean, sort of US funds and interest from US is slightly skewing some deals, and people obviously see those deals taking place, see the headlines and think that's what I want for my business, but it isn't market norm, and in the UK our funds are slightly more prudent and take a bit more of a risk-averse approach to valuation.
Okay, thanks. I'd be really tempted to go into the whole preference shares versus preference discussion, but that's maybe for another day. Time for, even though we're slightly behind schedule, I don't want to sort of shortchange you with these guys. Time for a couple of questions. So, Cara, could you be really kind? Thank you. So there's a gentleman in the middle here with his hand up, and then we will break for probably a slightly abbreviated coffee break.
Morning panel, thank you very much. Extremely insightful. Chandila Fernando, Innovation Centre, Entrepreneur in Residence to Montfort University. Long story short, we are probably in the 18th century in terms of funding and venture, etc. But I was very curious, Henry, you mentioned there's been an explosion in mitigated terms of venture debt. Is that at the pre-Series A stage? In other words, you've got some form of institutional investor and that you're actually onto a step change, or is that a product that actually could meet what Sarah was describing, the gap?
So in terms of the numbers of 2018 looking to be a record year, that's sort of all venture debt across all stages. But what's driving those levels is the emergence of new venture debt providers. Some of them are sort of still quite risk averse and towards the more proven end of the spectrum. Others, like Nigel's program, are at the earlier stage and taking on more risk, and we're sort of seeing them opening up across that value chain. So it should, or that risk chain rather. It's maybe a better way of putting it. So you should start seeing more available at each stage, because it's more interest from these kinds of funds in this kind of investment.
The different venture debt providers sort of say to us that they don't really want to look at anything with turnover below $1 million, so tends to lend itself more towards Series A, and they'll do about 25% of the total funding round.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Yes, the lady with the glasses on her head.
Hi, June Dawson, Praxis Work Well. I've got a question for Henry around, do you have a kind of measurement of what you consider to be the key characteristics of high growth businesses in the UK?
We use a number of sort of measurements. So Nigel earlier mentioned the OECD definition, which is our sort of fallback. When you've reached your £10 million turnover and you're disclosing all of that, and you can see the growth in the numbers, that's sort of our fallback for the outer bubble of the high growth companies. To try and find the other ones earlier, it's quite difficult because what you guys all say about your businesses is slightly different, and from sector to sector, what counts as growth is slightly different. So if we're looking at a pharmaceuticals company, we don't look at revenue metrics. We're not interested in anything like that. Actually, we're looking at what phase your trials are at, or something like that. So it is sort of really different, and we're driven slightly by what's available and what our researchers can find on a given business. But if we do try and sort of then substantiate holistically what that growth looks like. So we did a piece looking at if you'd invested in every single high growth company, according to us, in 2011, what would that growth, for you as an investor, look like in your portfolio? And you would have got a 30% CAGR, so 30% compound annual growth rate. So each year going up by that valuation, even with the number of companies that would die. About 15% of your companies had died, so that had been written down to zero. But with up rounds and exits, you're looking at a 30% year-on-year growth. So that's sort of maybe the benchmark for growth, is to grow by 30%
So really, it's really financially driven. It's not looking at the characteristics of what led to that financial success of the business.
So that was looking at the valuation of the business, which usually takes in the right metric for the sector. So your investors will agree a higher valuation if you reach the right clinical trial, if that's appropriate for your sector. Whereas if you're a very commercial business, that would probably be driven by a revenue metric.
I think, I mean, unfortunately, I don't know that there's a magic formula, because if Henry had it, he wouldn't be sitting here, I imagine. He'd be a very wealthy man indeed, or even wealthier than he is already. But I think one of the, I mean, you raise a very good point, because I'm still surprised about how many very sophisticated technologists and engineers and software gurus I meet, who, when it comes to starting to raise finance, don't do that much research, even if they come from an R&D background. So I think there's still some principles there, which is before you set off on the journey of raising money, or even talking to Nigel and his colleagues, do as much research using things like Bohurst and other resources as you can, because that does give you a feel for what's going on. But ultimately, when it comes to raising money, that will also depend on, yes, the specific technology and IP that you own, and also the form of negotiation that you have, which is again why you might variously use the help of the likes of Kira and Newable, or the likes of Sarah at Grant Thornton, in terms of getting that business plan and that growth plan together around the technology and IP that you've developed.
Thank you. Panel, thank you very much indeed. We're now going to take a break. Because we're running slightly behind time, can I suggest we take a break for 10 minutes to apply? And there are two parts to your application. One part is, have you got a really cool project? And the other part is, are you a sensible business? Or a suitable business, I should have said. Sensible is quite cool as well. To talk about your project application, we have Emma Fadlon from the Knowledge Transfer Network, who's going to talk about the assessor's prayer.
Okay, so first of all, how many of you have written an Innovate UK grant before? So quite a few of you. This is going to be quite familiar territory. How many of you have been used the KTN to have a look at their application and got some feedback in there? So a few of you. So one of the things that's worth knowing is that we're going to talk about the structure, but we are here to help you find the right partners, collaborators, give you a bit of information. For particularly those of you who are new to writing grant applications, we can spend a bit of time to make sure that the content and the structure of your application is in line with what Innovate UK does. So I just want to sort of introduce that as a help. So why am I up here? Well, I'm in the Access to Funding and Finance team, and I work with the other knowledge transfer managers in the KTN to help get companies funding and investment ready. I focus more on the early stage investment and series up to Series A, but we do work across with a whole range of technologies and sector backgrounds within our little team. So I've also had experience in grant writing. I've been on both sides of the table. So when I'm talking about this, I'll be talking with having had the war wounds and the scars of the failures and the successes. And as we know, failure tends to be a lot higher when it comes to grants. So how do you write a compelling project application? What are the things that you need to remember? And the one thing I have to always keep on reiterating to people, this is not an academic style application. The applications we look at are business plans, really. If you look at it, the questions that are being asked, information, it's about really extracting the key information from your business plan, your operational plan, your route to market, around what you're trying to achieve as a business with the technology that you're asking for funding to support and develop. So do keep that in mind. It's not a grant in the research for research sake. I got a very nice picture here from one of my colleagues who put this up, avoiding pumpkin heads. Now this is something that quite often happens when people write grants, is that you all give somebody a different section to fill in on the application. And somebody who's doing one element of the work will do, say, the marketing bit, somebody else will do the finances, somebody else will do the R&D. And basically, like with that little game when you roll a piece of paper and everybody draws something, the application looks like this, a real mess. It doesn't have any structure. And I was actually helping over the summer one of the applicants to the loans with their application. That's exactly what I got. And it was quite fun trying to unpick who'd written what. You could even tell in the writing style. So one of the things you really want to do is try and avoid an application that isn't cohesive, that very clearly is being written in silos rather than looking at the whole project. So why do we call it answering the assessor's prayer? Well, that's because if you look at these, so many of them just do not answer the question. You have 5 assessors. One of them is going to love you, 3 of them are going to be sitting in the middle ground, and 1 is absolutely going to hate you. And I think those of you who've had applications, would you say that's a good assessment? Yeah. And you kind of wonder, like, did they read what I wrote? And I think the thing you've got to remember is, reflect back is like, did you really write what you thought you wrote? So that's kind of the view of the world that we have. So the first thing to remember is that it is both an exam and a story. So there are keywords and answers that are contained in the questions. There's a lot of compelling questions that need to be answered. So do stay on, basically on message in what they're doing. So actually pull out each of those headings and make sure you've sort of ticked, have I really answered each of those headings if they're relevant to me in the questions, in the guidance that you've got. And effectively what you've got is 10 scored questions and the 3 appendices. And you don't really need more than 400 words in each of those sections, but you've got those appendices to put in good information. Whenever you can, use pictures and images and graphs and things like that, and use those appendices well. Sometimes you get a lot of information which is just duplicating what they've written in the text rather than supportive information, and those appendices can really bring up what you're trying to say and evidence what you're trying to say. So, project summary. You need to give a really good summary of your project. It's not going to be scored, but what you want to do is remember, this is the first thing they're going to read. You need to wow people. They've got to say, yeah, I really get this. This is great. So think of it in your value proposition pitch or your elevator pitch. This is where you're going to be bookending. This is where we are. This is what we want to do. This is what we're going to have at the end of it. This is why the world needs us. And think about the writing style. One of the things we say with all grant applications is use an editorial style. An editorial style is short sentences, usually 9-10 words, no more than that. And I get a lot of applications with lots of colons, semicolons, and hyphens and brackets. And from a reading point of view, it's very difficult to get those core messages out. So almost try and write it in a bullet point. And remember, this is the first impression you're going to get, and that is going to assessors are going to be looking at lots of different applications. They are experts in your field or aspects of your field. They are going to either switch on or switch off quite quickly depending on how you introduce yourself. So first one is the need or the challenge. And basically, what is the business need? Is there a challenge, societal challenge? You know, this week we've got the clean, the green week. Are there technological challenges that need to be done there? Is there a market opportunity behind this? Where has that come from? Where are you going? And it's really important that you actually articulate the unmet business needs and saying where you want to go, why you want to do it, how you validated that business need, where have you got that evidence from, and explaining that you understand the wider context in which your technology sits. So some of you may be part of a much bigger value chain, and actually being able to explain to the assessors where you actually sit in our whole technology landscape and the supply chain can be very important. Very few technologies are standalone. So the sort of scoring that we get, and we'll only put this one up, but with the other slides we give you for each of the questions, is this is how an assessor will go through and score. So at the bottom end, a score of 1 to 2 is that there's really little or no business drive to the project. The references on the state of the art are not offered or are not relevant. So when you're explaining what you're doing, don't think of it like if you're changing a problem in the world, say, I don't know, electric vehicles, for example, you're not saving the problems of decarbonising the whole of the British motorway. What you might be solving is a problem around how do you get a better range for a hybrid vehicle in a city centre where there's not many, electrical points. Focus on that. What's the evidence? Rather than saying about the big problem that you're trying to solve, is be specific to the context in which your technology is going to be used. And if you've really clearly described that and there's a compelling motivation, you understand the business needs, you've got a clear understanding of who your nearest competitors are, and you've shown how your project's going to build up on either your previous research work or the state of the art as it is now, then you're going to be scoring more in the 9 or 10s. And what happens is most people end up scoring around the 7s and 8s unless they've got a really clear explanation in there. And really, you should be able to get 10 out of 10 on this, because you shouldn't be pursuing what you're doing if you don't really understand what the need is. Approach and innovation. So how are you going to go about doing this? Where's the focus on the innovation? There's got to be a risk involved in what you're doing. There's got to be a level of innovation. And sometimes, particularly from an engineering point of view, when you understand what the risks are, is people tend to under-risk their projects and make it read almost like they've addressed all of the issues already, so then they're not considered a high-risk project. So be really clear and really honest about where your risks are. What are the big technology challenges? What are the milestones that you're aiming for? How is this going to link into how you're better than your competitors? So whether it's around the performance criteria you have to demonstrate, or the materials, or recyclability if it's electric vehicles and batteries. And what earlier work and evidence is there behind that? And appendix in the question 2 is a really good chance for you to put that extra information in to give that wow factor to your application. So do use that wisely. Team and resources. Well, you are the people who are going to make this happen. There's as much of an investment in you if you're going for private equity investment, and also Innovate UK is in investing in you and in your team, and we believe that you can be successful. So don't hide your light under the bushel. Bring out those key factors, skills and capabilities, knowledge that you've got. What are the skills that people bring in? What doors can they open if it's route to market? And don't be shy about it. It's really, really important that you show that you are the best and that we're funding the best. Market awareness. So the question that we have here is, what is the market you're targeting, and what's it look like now? What's it going to look like in the future? And the biggest problem we have is people giving sort of top-down assessments of the market, not really prioritizing where they're coming from, being realistic about what the route to market is going to be, what the niches that you fit in, how you're going to prioritize and target your market entry. And this is an area that you really need to spend a little bit of time on there. And you need to have a very clear value proposition for that market you're targeting. There's got to be a compelling need, there's got to be a value associated with it. Quite often you can monetize what the size of that need is in the market, and you can explain why you're going for that market. And we understand that your nearest market may not be the biggest market, but if it's the first one you can prove your technology in, and you've got the easiest route to access, and you've got the right relationships and collaborations, that's good. That is more than good enough, because that proves your technology and gets you out there. So think about your market and your prioritization modeling. I mean, how many of you here have done a really robust prioritization modeling and have actually gone out there and evidenced it with their stakeholders for these projects? Yeah, so it's good to see a few of you. Do that, and if you can get that evidence base and that numbers from your potential end users or your customers, that's really, really good evidence for that. And I think, for me, actually knowing your market and your value proposition is a key to getting this right and what you're developing. So outcomes and route to market. So this is about having a scalable business. So it's not only about proving your technology, but it's also being able to take it out there and grow your business and build your customer base. So how are you going to grow your business, and how are you going to increase your productivity, and what is the long-term aim of this project? You're coming forward, you've got a vision about where you want to be, not in 2 years' time, but in that 10 years' time. So, as we said, the most important thing here, I think, is to be able to have a real clear understanding of who your customers are, how you're going to reach them, and what value you bring to each of those customers. And it won't be the same for each one. And your route to market is how you're going to reach each of those. You've got to have a credible approach. If you've already got the good partnerships or collaborations in place, you've been given performance criteria you have to meet in order to be beta tested or have an MVP deployed in a partnership. Put all that information in. This is really credible evidence that what you're doing is right and that this is your route to market, is the right approach. I mean, we're all understand you might have to pivot and change things, you might have to build a level of flexibility, but be very sure about what it is that you're asking for that investment and that funding for. This is what you're going to be doing. With the outcomes, of course, these are going to be part of your milestones, and that's what you're aiming for, so they should all link into what you're asking the funding for and how that links into your project and your operational plan. So wider impacts. So this is a question around, you've got outputs, which is what you're going to do with the project money. Impact is how that's going to unlock the wider problem. So really, what is the wider benefits of your technology? And this is actually still part of your value proposition. And when you do a value proposition, you do benefits to the customer and the end user, and then there's a wider benefits to their customers and end users. And it could be economic, there could be a social issue around it, it could be environmental. In some cases, there's kind of a greater good question in there. But it's worth thinking about what those are, what they could be, how they map into your different customers or your end users. And also think about the regional impacts you might have. And it's not just around job creation, and that's a very important one. There are other things that you can bring into that. So spend a bit of time thinking about it and actually capturing that. It's an area that sometimes can be very difficult to monetize, but I think it's definitely worth trying to pull that down and pull that out. And it could be very specific. I looked at a rail software, and actually the biggest impact was not only on the planning, but actually on securing that people had really nice journeys, that they weren't stuck in various places, and there was some very good evidence to back up what they were trying to do around that. So you had the social impact was really important, but actually the bigger impact was the financial penalties that a rail company is imposing with delayed travel. So there are two benefits around that. Then project management. So for most of you, this is going to be sort of a safe zone for you. The previous slide is a bit of discomfort because it's a little bit of finger in the air and sort of less sort of certainty. And we need to see that you've got a really solid plan, that actually the work packages are logical, that the risks have been identified, that you explain how you're going to mitigate any of those technical risks or project risks. You've got subcontracting in there. Everything is very clearly described, right contracts, right research collaborators and partners, and do have a good solid Gantt chart with the key tasks and the key milestones clearly identified, and any risks that you've identified, do put those in. And risks are commercial risks, not just technical risks. Do remember that there's commercialization risks. So if part of your program is that you've got to get somebody to test it, put in there some activities which is around building up those right collaborations and understanding what the performance criteria are that you need. So, risks. This is where you pull all those risks out and you actually capture them. You've got your project plan, and this is where you're going to put through your risk assessment in that project. And they could be technical, they could be commercial, they could be environmental or regulatory. You know what's appropriate for your sector, and if you don't know what some of the regulatory frameworks that you might need to be delivering to and expected to deliver to at this phase of the project, go out there and ask those questions or put it down as part of your work package. If you know, you don't know, but that's part of what you need to find out. That's part of your risk matrix. Don't underplay where the risks are. We understand that this is a technology, there's a high risk to it, there's an innovation associated with. The assessors will understand that. If you miss out very big risks and gaps, then actually will be marked against you because it shows you don't understand what you're doing or the landscape you're playing in. So Appendix 8 is your chance to put in your risk register. And you can put these things either as a graph or as an image, a picture, whatever is the most appropriate for your project. So, impact, the additionality of this funding. Why should our taxpayers' money be given to your project? What is the benefits that that's going to give? What injection is this going to give to your business to take it forward? And this is where you justify why you need this funding from us at this point in time. And again, it's an area I found when I've read applications, people tend to sort of be a little bit reticent to sort of say how big and great this opportunity is and that it's a really high risk investors won't invest in it, or I need to meet these performance criteria in order for me to be able to approach my commercial collaborators or partners. Be aware about where you sit in the value chain, and that you explain why you need to de-risk yourself in that particular value chain, and then how, if you meet these criteria, will open up that opportunity for you. There are lots of different things you can bring into that. Costs and value for money. So what is the cost of the project, and how does that represent value for money for me as a taxpayer? Sometimes it's quite a difficult thing to ask and think about, but quite a lot of you will have examples where you understand the framework in which you're working in. There might be some cost-benefits analysis and modelling that's been done for you. With academic bases, quite often you can get a bit of modelling around that, risk-benefit modelling. So just think about what that can be, and it could be increased VAT into the country, so that increases the coffers of the Treasury. It could be around productivity or efficiency. It could be that you're aligned to the government, industrial strategy that we're developing now. So do try and capture everything that you've got. And it's usually a good way of starting with a bullet point and just put everything down you think it can be, and then write that narrative. Small print. Read what they're asking for. Read the small print. Quite often people do not answer the questions and haven't read them properly. And also check that you're in scope. Make sure that you are doing what you need to do. You go to the briefing events. We can help you with scope, whether this is the appropriate application for you or not. If you talk to the KT managers in the area. And we can sometimes identify alternative funds and grants for you, which might be more appropriate than going for that particular call. Innovate UK, I've got a great helpline, and the technologists there will be able to answer questions as well. And people are here to help. We want you to succeed. We're not here to trip you up. Though we say it's an exam, it's actually also, it's out for us. What drives us and gets us out of bed is to make sure that you're successful. So do users and get the help. And if you're short of collaborators or partnerships in that, then we can maybe help turn this around. Maybe rather than being the lead, you could be a partner in a project. There are different ways to solve that. Feedback. As we said, assessors, we will have a different view of the world. As we said, one of them will love you, one of them will hate you, and the other three will probably give you between a 7 and 8. Don't give anybody an opportunity to hate you. So, in summary, from the very beginning you want to wow them, so make sure you've got a really nice clear statement of what that project is, what the value proposition is. You've got a very clear explanation of where you fit in the marketplace, who your competitors are, what are your USPs over those competitors. Make sure you've answered the questions. So literally go through, do a separate checklist when you've written things and just say, what are the questions? So what I used to do an Excel spreadsheet with these are the things I need to answer for each question, and I'll put in all the elements, who I thought I needed to go to get that. And then I'd go at the end of it and say, have we answered all of this? Is this clear? It's worth doing that time up front of planning how you're going to answer the application and then double checking. And put the effort into the appendices. This is your chance to give all that extra information that you can't write in text. As I said, a nice narrative. Don't have a pumpkinhead application where you can tell that lots of different people have written it. And if in doubt, come to the KTN, come speak to Innovate UK. We are there to help. We have a good application guide which you can download off our website, and that just goes through what we've discussed now to help you. And you've got other support in your area that you should be engaging with, and hopefully you have already. So we've got the KTM, but you've also got regionally your Enterprise Europe network colleagues. And for those of you in particular technology sectors that map onto the catapults, do use the support and the resources within those Innovate UK funded networks. You have a lot of competition when you write for grants, so stand out. Don't hide your light under the bushel. You're here, the best, you're the star company. Make sure you make that really clear in what you write. We can't guess that if we can't read that in your application. So it's your unique selling points and what is your value proposition? How do you differentiate yourself from the market? So register with KTN for newsletters and any information and grants and things, if, for those of you who haven't. That's it.
Emma, thank you very much indeed.
I'm going to have to leave, but if you want to be in touch, then please get my email, drop an email to me. I can leave, I'll leave some business cards with Poonam, or if you need those. Okay. I think it was a question, but I don't know. Is that okay?
Okay, yeah, let's do a quick question. Gentleman over there.
Hello, thank you. This is Carl Stipons from Algaceuticals. I loved your profile of the assessors, of which one loves you, 3 don't care, and 1 really hates you. We recently applied for a grant. We got 89% awarded across the lot. 4 of the judges loved us. 1 of us read a different proposal from the others. What right of appeal do you have in a situation like that?
That I can't answer, because that's an Innovate UK one.
I can answer that question. None.
That's clear.
Please read the terms and conditions on our website. No, frankly speaking, the way we look at it is, if you scored 89%, don't worry, that's good. That's really good. That's super duper good.
We still
so
didn't
if
get
one
granted.
of them didn't like it, then the others must have loved it so much. So, but seriously speaking, we have a process. The process is applications come in, they go out to those 5 assessors, the 5 assessors will score and send back their marks to us. We will look at the average scores across those assessors. We will also look at the variation within one application, so between the assessors. We will look at all the comments from all of those assessors. We will look at the question that we asked the assessors to answer, which is, would you recommend that Innovate UK Loans Limited continue to consider this from a funding point of view? We will look at their recommendation as to whether this is an experimental development project rather than, say, a feasibility study, which was out of scope for this competition. We will undertake what we call a moderating activity in a line draw discussion, and we will look at the scores, particularly those where there is a wide variation between the responses from assessors, particularly at those that are close to the line that we will draw that says above this we consider it high quality, below this it's not of sufficient quality for a project for us to fund. And that line typically we draw at about 70%. If something appears to have outliers, i.e. one assessor just didn't get it and marked it really, really high and nobody else did, or marked it really, really low and nobody else did, and if we think that looking at their feedback and the comments that they make in relation to each of the individual questions, we'll look at the scores across all of those questions, across the whole thing, we'll look at the comments, and if we think that one of the assessors is inconsistent, is an outlier, just hasn't got it, we have the right to remove that score from the other 5, from the other 4, and average the 4 in order to get to a moderated score. So we try to take into account the natural level of variation that there is in the assessment process around the project. We're not yet at the point where we're using machine learning to do this. I hope we'll get there soon, so that we can have augmented intelligence to supplement the human process, because I think we should be doing that and getting in that direction. After all of that, we draw the line, we make the decisions, something goes forward or doesn't go forward to Innovate UK Loans Limited for consideration, and then a potential loan offer. It does say on our website that A, we don't provide the identities of assessors, and B, we are not prepared to enter into any correspondence around the results of assessment. We will provide you with the feedback. You may not like or appreciate or agree with all of that feedback, but because of the process, because of the volume of applications we get, unfortunately, one of the key terms and conditions for Innovate UK's overall activity, including innovation loans, is that the judges' scores and comments are final. So the assessors' scores are final. So sorry, that's a long but hopefully detailed and transparent answer to my simple, glib no.
I do have a follow-up question, if I may. We've
Okay.
been recommended to resubmit the proposal, taking into account the assessor's comments. Is it likely that we'll get the same set of assessors the
No.
second time round?
Not necessarily. We draw our assessors from a pool. For innovation loans, we've worked with colleagues to try to identify a pool of appropriate assessors who are perhaps a bit more bulgy wallet than pointy head, because we want to see commercial activity coming out of this, and it's not about the hardcore science element. So people with a .ac.uk email address are perhaps less suitable for this than someone with a .com or .co.uk. So we've tried to look at it from that point of view, but it's from a pool. You identify in your application what your area of technology or sector is, and we will try to allocate to an appropriate pool of appropriate assessors from within that pool. If you've submitted once and you choose to submit again, I'm not sure that we recommend resubmission. We say that you might wish to resubmit. It's not our job to recommend things to people like yourselves. It's your choice, your businesses. If you resubmit, you might get different assessors. You might get similar ones. From a credit point of view, you will almost certainly get the same credit specialist looking at it again, and if they thought that the financial side of things was not there first time round, without any material change, they're likely to think it's not there the second time round. So please take that into consideration if you're choosing to resubmit.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you ever so much, Emma. Someone's choosing. Very quickly, with the microphone, please.
Just a quick one. I appreciate your invigilators are secret.
Assessors.
Assessors, all right. Assessors. Are the terms of the NDA they have signed public?
No.
So how do we know whether or not one of your assessors is actually a competitor to us?
You don't know. But there is a non-disclosure agreement or a confidentiality agreement included in our assessor's engagement contract. If that's a significant challenge for you, please contact our customer support service team, who can route you through to our competitions team, who will have a good answer to this question, because I'm sure it's been asked before, and they will have, frankly, a better answer than I might.
Well, thank you. I do appreciate that. We did apply to Cisco once for funds, who are worth several billions, as you know.
I've heard of them.
We found their assessors were, in fact, not controlled absolutely by NDAs.
Well, I'm sure Cisco's a terrific organisation, but that's a different story for another day. Why on the one that's recorded? Let's hope I don't get sued. I should declare that our former chairman of our governing board is from Cisco. So, Phil, if you're listening, yay. Okay. For my next career-limiting move, okay, I'm going to whiz through the credit side of things. So what Emma has talked about is the part A. How cool is your project? The 10 questions. When you get this slide pack sent round to you, if you go and read the guidance for applicants, all the detail of those questions is set out. Part B is about your business. Are you a suitable business for us to consider lending to, and is there a need for public sector funding for you? I would hope that you think about this first before you throw something at us, because you're taking entering into a significant financial commitment if you take on a loan from us. And I hope that you, as directors of a business, of a limited company, which you probably will be, take your fiduciary responsibilities very seriously, because this is a serious thing to do. In Part B, we ask you 7 questions. I'm not going to go through them all here. We want to know what sort of loan you want, what length of time, how that's split between the 3 different periods, and why. And a lot of people, when they're applying, they do a couple of things. They say, they give us a number on their question B1 around the loan, which is different from what's in their financial forecast, and we go, They set out, oh yeah, we'd like 3 years plus 2 years plus 5 years. They don't say why, they don't justify that, so we're left thinking, you just wanted the maximum period available for the cheapest cost, and that doesn't sound very convincing. Justify that to us, please. We're really interested in the management team of your business. So in part A, you're talking about who's going to deliver the project. We're interested in their expertise, their capability for project delivery. In part B, we want to know about the overall management of your business. How are you going to grow? How are you going to scale? Have you got the right commercial people in place, or will you have those people in place? Have you got a CFO? Gosh, I like it when I see a CFO, even if it's a part-time CFO. If it's just, oh yeah, we outsource our bookkeeping, that implies to me that you're not thinking about your future financing strategy to match your technology development strategy, your commercialization strategy. You need to be thinking strategically about money because it's a critical resource. Cash is super important for the risky businesses that we're supporting. So seeing that capability that probably isn't relevant to a technology project or an innovation project, but is really relevant to the capability of your business to grow and to operate at scale, to have repeatable, reliable, grown-up processes that we're looking for. Other questions in part B include understanding about the risks overall to your business. In part A, we asked you about the risks and how you manage those risks in relation to your project. Part B, we're interested in those risks in relation to your overall business, which might be whopping great market risks, super duper competitor risks, all sorts of legal, political, regulatory risks. How are you managing those? And if you say there aren't any, then we're probably going to say then there's no point us getting involved. Just go and talk to your local bank manager, because if you're a risk-free business, then you should be fine. We asked you also, actually we asked you one of the questions a second time. So whereas in part A we asked you about added value or additionality. We use the term added value because it's I'm not allowed to use long words. In part B we asked you the same question. We want to know why we should provide you with funding. And that doesn't mean to say that you have to come back to us with a written certified letter from your local bank manager saying no, with a big stamp rejected on it. It may well be that you've had a rational discussion with providers of finance from the equity market, from the commercial debt market, from other markets, to say that for this particular activity, at this particular time, additional commercial finance isn't available, and therefore it's appropriate for us to lend to you. Simply saying 3.7% over 10 years is dirt cheap, why am I going to talk to a bank? That's not going to come across very well, frankly. And as Innovate UK Loans Limited, we might be inclined not to forward that one on from a credit point of view. If you say, I don't want to give away equity in my business because if I take in external shareholders, I will lose control, I will think, and certainly when I'm on the credit committee, I will think, no, I don't believe that. I'm allergic to the expression giving away equity. At the right valuation, exchanging shares for cash, issuing new shares in order to gather a valuable resource to grow your business is absolutely a rational and sensible and good thing to do. So just saying I'm not going to give away shares and lose control, again, that's not a good reason not to for you to take on this public sector funding. Think about a broader perspective around that. And another answer that I'm seeing quite frequently in projects at the moment or applications at the moment is, we've talked to the British Business Bank and they won't lend to us. And when I see that answer, I know that someone's telling porky pies, because the British Business Bank doesn't lend to anybody. The British Business Bank works through partners and provides guarantees, provides funding, provides mechanisms to enhance the supply of capital to smaller businesses through partner organisations on the equity side and on the debt side. So someone that says, I've talked to the British Business Bank and they've refused to lend to me, I don't believe that they have talked to the British Business Bank. I think they've just made that up because they think that that's what we want to hear. So please think about that one. Just saying. Anyway, I'll stop whining. What do we look for in credit? We look for the similar things that most lenders would look for. Our credit team, Scott O'Brien, our head of lending operations and risk, he has 2 credit analysts with banking backgrounds. Cara has now joined the team, so we're hopefully going to be able to manage the cases. Our credit specialists are credit trained, unlike me. I've just been around a while. And they look at the standard things. We want to know the character of the business and of the people involved, which is why we ask a question in Part B is, who are the owners of the business? If they have a track record of spectacular failures and creditors left unsatisfied after businesses have failed, we're going to think, maybe they allow their businesses to fail, and don't worry that creditors are left unpaid. We're not particularly keen on that. If they have a spectacular history of whopping great successes, then we'll think, oh, that's cool. If things haven't always gone according to plan in previous businesses, and yet they can demonstrate that they've done what they can to make sure that people aren't left out of pocket, then that's okay. You know, we want people who take risk and do things. But a whole string of county court judgments that are unsatisfied would imply an approach to financial management that is not of the standard that we're looking for when we're managing public money. We are very interested in the management team, and in that, I suppose we're somewhat similar to equity investors. Equity investors always say, Peter Callaly, for example, former chair of the former UK Business Angels Association Investor of the Year. He's written a book recently called The Invested Investor, had a launch party in Cambridge last night that sadly I missed. He says that the first slide should be a summary and the second slide should be the team, if you're approaching him. We think similarly. It's about the capability of this team to deliver not just a cool project, but to grow this business in such a way that you'll be in a position to repay us. So we're very interested in the management team, the breadth, the capability, the capacity of the business to take on this activity and to deliver and discharge it and therefore repay our loan. We're interested in capacity to repay. We want to understand the financial standing of the business. So we want to look at the future cash flows. We're much more forward-looking than backward-looking. We ask you to provide us with financial information, so the past 3 years of financial accounts. If you're such a new business that you don't have 3 years of financial accounts going backwards, don't worry. Provide us what you do have. If you haven't yet filed, if you filed 1 year but you're partway through this year and you haven't yet filed that, send us in the management accounts that are as up to date as possible to give us a sense as to the financial standing of your business. And I'm responding to a specific question here. If you haven't got any turnover yet, then show us how you're going to have the capability to pay interest in the short term, because this is a loan that will charge interest, require you to pay interest from the end of the first quarter. So where's the capital? How much cash have you got in your business? And is it appropriate that that capital, that cash, be used to pay interest when actually the people whose cash is in the business, probably the founders, external investors, they probably want you to be using that cash to grow the heck out of the business, and they might say, yeah, there's leakage there, I'm not so keen on that. Be sure for yourself and for your investors that it's the right thing to do. So we will look at cash flows. So please provide us with plausible cash flows going forward. If you're looking for a loan that's going to last 7 years, please provide us with cash flows that go forward 7 years. I know that after year 3 or so, it's going to be based on assumptions, and who knows what might happen. But if you haven't even thought about it, and quite often people come to us and say, there's no point us giving you more than 3 years because it's guesswork after that. Well, actually, I want you to have thought about the up scenario, the down scenario, the base case, what might happen, and to have thought about it. And even though reality won't prove to be the same as those predictions, I'd like you to evidence, to demonstrate that you have thought about it, that for your business's point of view, it's the right thing for you to do. And we will then look at that. We will stress those cash flows. So if you give us a super duper hockey stick, we'll go, yeah, right. Because often the applicants in Innovate UK programme are, we had one fantastic business that we've lent money to that's founded by 3 scientists. and they're physicists, and they are super duper techie people. And they had calculated, they'd looked at their pipeline, they'd calculated the probability of success of each single contract within that pipeline, and they'd given it a risk weighting, and they gave us the numbers to the nearest penny, and it sort of went like that, which was really nice. We've had other applications that start off like that, and then they go absolutely flat. No change at all in years 4 to 9, because they say that they've said to us that between years 4 and 9 they're repaying the loan. There's enough cash flow there to repay the loan, so why would you need to know anything different? We want to know how your business is going to grow. We don't want you to be super conservative and stress everything to the point where it's only just, it's almost entirely plausible and there's no opportunity for growth in that. We'd like to see, what I'd love to see, it's not mandated, it's not required, but I love it when I see it. My credit specialist colleagues really like it and send a message around the WhatsApp group saying, oh, look, someone's done a sensitivity analysis. They've given us an upside case of what if things go brilliantly well. They've given us a base case. This is what we intend to deliver and we really believe we can deliver. And they give us a downside case saying, oh God, the project took a year longer than we thought. Getting into the market took a year longer than we thought. The revenues were only half what we expected. But it still works. And we're comfortable as a business that it still works. We like that. You don't have to do that. It's not a requirement at the moment, but we like it when you demonstrate that you've thought those things through, because I hope that when you're having that conversation amongst your board of directors of your company and with the shareholders in your company, you're thinking that way. You're strategically planning where your business should go. Capital, we're very interested, particularly because so many of your businesses that we're getting applications from are relatively early stage, are generating low to or sometimes no immediate cash flows. The level and nature of capital in your business is really important. And I've got a specific slide on capital in a second to talk about that issue of undertaking and difficulty that was raised earlier. We're really interested in the markets in which you operate. You'll have described them in Part A. Our credit specialist team will look at that Part A. We really want to know your competitive position. And that doesn't mean doing what people normally do in pitch decks, which is having a chart where you've got your solution, the 4 plausible competitors, you've got ticks in every single box and they haven't, and yeah, doesn't that look great? Nobody believes that, by the way. The competitor that is never mentioned on that slide in all those pitch decks that are done at Pitchfest and whatever is people do nothing. Inertia is the biggest competitor of all, not changing. So in that market that you're at, when you're looking at it both bottom up and top down, think about what are you going to do? How are you going to get into that market, and is it big enough, and is it going to grow, and are the cash flows that you're going to generate sufficient to repay this loan? And we know that there's risk in that. There will be innovation risk. That's what we want. There will also be political and regulatory risk, and I don't think I'm allowed to talk about, hey, I've ruined my career already. Yeah, there's going to be all sorts of political risk. How are you going to address that? And the control culture. We're really interested to make sure that you can show that you think through making sure that you will be in a position to meet your responsibilities, not just for the project and the spend control environment there, but also for your overall business. We will look at all of those things. We will, if we think it's appropriate, make you a loan offer, and there will be conditions. Those conditions, those sort of the terms and conditions in a transaction, those are to protect us if things start to go off track. And the collateral that you will offer, in our case, we're looking for it, but as I said, we ascribe no value to it. Those are, again, protections. Fundamentally, it's the character, the capacity, and the capital that we'll look at forward-looking around the cash flows, and the collateral and the terms and conditions, that's if things go wrong. They don't compensate for points 1, 2, and 3. Boring slide, sadly horribly important. This is state aid. in this loan, and therefore, in order for us to meet the requirements of the general block exemption regulations, because we're providing funding under Article 25, so this is not risk finance, this is research and development support. If you are a company and you are over 3 years old and your accumulated losses exceed 50% of the subscribed share capital, then according to the European Commission's General Block Exemption Regulation definitions, you're basically going bust. And therefore, you are considered by them to be an undertaking in difficulty, and therefore we are not permitted to offer you state aid, which would be in the form of this loan. Therefore, we would encourage you, if this calculation applies to you, please, can you provide us with some information, some evidence that will show how you will mitigate this issue? That might be that you have more recent numbers that show that actually, whilst your last financial accounts might make it appear as though that you're an undertaking in difficulty, recent numbers show that actually those accumulated losses have reduced because you're now generating profits, and therefore the calculation is whatever it is. So those might be recent management accounts. You might be planning to raise additional capital. Maybe you've got an equity raise plan as part of this, maybe you want it to coincide. Tell us about that. We'll look at the credibility of that, the plausibility of that. We may make you an offer that says that a loan would be conditional upon successful completion of that capital raising. It might be that you have some directors' loans or shareholders' loans. You're funding your business not through equity investment but through loans. It might be that you would propose to convert those from loans into equity because actually permanent capital is good in your business. Actually, it will help us view you from a character point of view, because if we see loans going into a business, it implies you want to take money out. If you put capital into the business, it implies you want it to stay in. I prefer staying in than loan funding that might come out. So that may be a way to mitigate this test. You might have a credible plan around looking at the way in which you treat your accounting conventions, how your depreciation policy, your policy around recognizing the value of intangible assets on your balance sheet. You might want to think about having a really serious conversation with an expert legal financial taxation advisor, or a series of them, to look at whether actually your accounting policies up to date have been appropriate, or maybe you're just doing what everyone else does, writing off R&D costs to P&L. Maybe there might be a different way to do that. And maybe if you were to undertake that activity sensibly, with good expert advice, in a proper way, that might be a way to mitigate this particular challenge. It's something that we would strongly encourage you to look at. This is a test that I'm not particularly keen on. I don't think it's intended to capture innovative businesses, but it is there. It is part of the regulations. We have to apply it. We will also look beyond this to, and do we think you're adequately capitalised from a credit point of view? But please take note of this test. Read this guidance. Talk to professional experts about the best way to manage and or mitigate and or address this particular test, because it is important. And the way in which we work, just to summarise and be very quick, we get your application. It's looked at by assessors. We draw a line and says above this it's innovative. We look at it from a credit point of view, initially in a sort of a triage or a is it not implausible test. If it's implausible or it's not innovative, then I'm afraid our answer is no. If it's either one of those, the answer is no. If it's highly innovative and not implausible, as in it's either recommended by our credit team or a marginal, then we might take it forward. If it's recommended and above the line from a quality point of view, it will go forward to detailed credit analysis. If it's a marginal recommend or a marginal decline, if it's a marginal recommend and it's in the top 3 quartiles of the innovation, we'll take it forward because we are biased towards innovation. If it's a marginal decline, so we thought it's nearly implausible, but there might be something to it, and it's in the top quartile of the scores that come back from our assessors. We will take it forward to detailed credit analysis because it's so innovative that we want to see if we can get it over the line. And that might be a short conversation that says, actually, no, it can't. Or it might be a longer conversation and maybe there are some mitigants, maybe there's some conditionality and perhaps it can work. So we'll do that. Then it goes forward to detailed credit analysis. That may lead to a loan offer. You'll present to our management, to our credit committee as one of the conditions of that loan offer. There may be other conditions. We want to meet you. We want to see your business. I enjoy going around light industrial estates from the Wirral to Luton. I've seen some fantastic places. We don't want you to come to Swindon because, gosh, that's boring. Much more interesting to meet you. And we would talk about the key terms of the offer, hopefully agree on those, and then we get into the final verification of key information, know your customer, anti-money laundering, those sorts of things undertaken through our lending administration partner, GC Business Finance up in Manchester. And we will ask you, as part of the documentation, to evidence to us that you've been through the corporate authorization process. That's a topical issue. It's good to have proper corporate authorization when you're entering into any financial commitment. Having unsecured, having overdrafts if you're making coffee and cakes or whatever that the board don't know about. From what I read in the paper, that's quite a risky thing to do. So we don't want you to enter into that sort of risk. So we'll even provide you with some suggested wording for those corporate authorizations from our lawyers that you might want to consider using. And then we get to the point where you would make a drawdown request once all those conditions are satisfied and all the documentation's tied up. And then you get into the availability period, drawing down the loan, doing your R&D. You'll have a monitoring officer who will come and check to make sure that your project is on track. We fund at the beginning of the quarter based on a drawdown request. Our credit specialist will also look at your financials from your most recent quarter to make sure that's all on track, making sure you haven't committed any events of default or breached any covenants or anything like that, in which case we'll have a conversation. And so on during the availability period. Then we get to the extension period. Still part of your project probably. Your monitoring officer is still there. Your credit analyst, credit specialist still coming and talking to you probably on a quarterly or annual basis. If you see them more often than that, it probably means something's going horribly wrong. If one of our credit specialists is visiting you weekly, then you've probably got other issues as well, and probably got other people visiting you weekly, knocking on the door with menaces or whatever. Hopefully that won't be too much the case. And then the repayment period, by which time the monitoring officer is no longer required because your project is complete, but the credit specialist will still be with you. That was our approach to credit. And I'm running behind time, and we really do want to hear from Thang. So unless there's any really burning questions that I haven't answered, I propose we scoot straight forward. Is anyone going to scream if I don't answer the question? Okay, one question down at the front.
In terms of the interest payments, when does that start?
The interest payments start at the end of the first quarter and then carry on quarterly throughout the period of the loan. There's no roll-up of interest. It's not a back-ended thing. This is interest payable quarterly in arrears based on the amount outstanding at the end of each quarter. Okay. Let's hear from someone real, because that's always much more useful and important and fun than hearing me pontificating. So I'm really pleased that one of our new borrowers is here. So this is Thang from Callaly Personal Care, however you prefer it. I think you prefer it this way, who's going to talk about his business, his innovation, and give you, I hope, some useful hints and tips around innovation loans. And then we're going to be a little bit late for lunch, but I hope you'll forgive me for poor timekeeping and see this as worthwhile. So.
Afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Nigel, for inviting me.
to be on the other side. So I was in one of your chairs back in March of this year, and very proud and happy to say that not quite the hunted being the hunter, because I don't have any money to lend, but I'm now on the other side, having received £1 million from this wonderful program. And as I said, I was here back in March. Anyways, by way of background, I'm sure you guys know there are a lot of well-known studies that prove that the presentation just before lunch, attention to detail, and retention is very poor, so hope you'll bear with me. I apologize. I also was given 15 minutes, but we're already about 15 minutes behind, so quite a lot of pressure here, and I just hope Nigel doesn't take away his loan if I mess up badly. So let me talk about an agenda. So in less than 15 minutes, I just want to tell you about my company. And you know, there's a lot of I'm always interested in the art and science of things, and there's been a lot of science about what needs to be done, the facts, the figures, the fine detail, but I wanted to show a bit of the art and tell you the tips and how I managed to convince Nigel and his team to get a loan. So I'm going to start with the company background, a bit of the loan, why we did it, what is it going to be spent for, and how we did it. So, moving forward, company background, but I guess I'll speak about myself real quickly. So, I consider myself a citizen of the world. My parents are Vietnamese. I'm Canadian. I was born in Canada. It was way too cold for my parents, so they moved to Singapore, where I grew up for 15 years. I have a North American accent, but it's a bit of a fake one because I went to an American school in Singapore. I went to university at MIT in Boston. Moved to New York, and then moved to the UK 17 years ago. So I've been in the UK longer than any other country. I have a British wife, 4 British kids, a very big British mortgage, so I'm very much a Brit. So career-wise, so first job out of university was I worked for Goldman Sachs in investment banking in New York. And somehow they promoted me, one of the youngest ever back then, and I wanted to do something different, so I joined the private equity and venture capital group here at Goldman. I'm not there anymore, sorry, but 17 years ago. And then after that, I didn't like finance too much. I wanted to create something, so I went from that to the most tangible thing possible, which is property, bricks and mortar. So for 10 years, I was head of acquisitions of a private property company called the Manhattan Loft Corporation. They do film studios, hotels, residential, and it was there that one of our tenants for one of our offices was a very senior gynecologist, became a very good friend of mine, and 4 years ago I decided to go full-time to, having backed him for over 10 years, to develop this company, which is called Callaly. So that is the bit of the company background. I will just also mention this, and it ties into why I'm doing this, because a lot of people might think this is a bit odd. Part of the reason, two things I wanted to say. As a former Goldman Sachs venture capitalist, I was on the other side of investing in companies, but this was after the first dot-com bust, right? So I've seen things in its worst state. I am a bit concerned about things getting frothy. I've seen what happens when you invest money in companies, you're never going to get it back. I mean, what do you do? And it's tough being on the other side. So it's very important to find the right partners in terms of capital, and that's why I'm absolutely delighted that we've got those kind of partners with this Innovate loan. And another thing that's important to me, which I'll tie in later, is part of the reason I left finance is I think they called it the quarter life crisis back then. You kind of work hard, go to a good university, have a good job, but you don't feel like there's much purpose in what you're doing, and our company is all about purpose now. It's very important to us, so that's a bit of the background of me. So we are in the femcare industry. Most people know it as the feminine hygiene industry, but we hate that word. It implies that there's something unhygienic about not using feminine hygiene products, so we're in the femcare industry. By way of background, most people don't trust the big brands or tampons. Women who use tampons, actually 7 out of 10 of them, and we've done this from thousands of studies, also use a panty liner at the same time. That tells you that it's not working very well. There's a lot of lack of innovation, and that's not me saying that. Here's this quote from The Guardian less than a year ago. It says here that there has been a lack of innovation or big thinking in 80 years. So that is exactly what we've solved with our first product. And femcare is frankly not very good for the environment. 100 billion period products are thrown away each year. And in particular, plastic applicators for tampons. They're just used once and thrown away. There are 7 billion thrown away each year. So our product helps eliminate that. So we've got an innovation in the femcare space. So our solution is this product. It's called a tamp liner. And here's one thing that's really important. Our product has been based on 25 years of research. So the gynecologist that I mentioned, he is now almost 70, but he's still one of the most senior gynecologists here in the UK in a same sexual health clinic that he founded years ago. But when he invented this was based on 25 years of listening to women talk about the lack of innovation in products, that there should be some sort of improvement. And very proud of this point. In 3 weeks, I'm in Orlando, Florida, because we've been nominated for the most important industry innovation award in disposable hygiene, and the other 2 finalists averaged 2.5 billion in revenue. So very much David versus Goliath. And this is good practice for me because I'm speaking in front of 700 people then, and I'm going to be launching the iPhone 1.0. So channeling my inner Steve Jobs. So that's in a couple weeks. So I'm not going to spend too much time here, but that's our new product. Our company is called Callaly because it looks like a calla lily flower. I won't go into too much details, but I will say that one very interesting thing that we're doing is we are, for now, only a subscription-based business. So everyone knows direct-to-consumer is a very hot space right now. Dollar Shave Club famously sold the company for $1 billion in 4.5 years. They didn't even invent anything. They're just disrupting razor blades. For us, we're excited because we're adding a lot of value by getting rid of that inconvenience that women have to do when they buy products. They have to buy a box of super, a box of regular, a box of panty liners. Why don't you get something customized exactly what you want for fixed fee, sent delivered to your door discreetly? You can adjust it in any fashion that you like. So you could ignore the fact that we've invented a new product. We're going to launch all the existing products, and we're really looking to disrupt this market and add value in numerous ways. Two more slides about the company. We've gotten a lot of praise from the press. We've soft launched earlier this year, a very quiet launch, but it spread very big and we had to shut down PR. If you look at this, we're a startup and everyone wants to talk about being a game changer. Cosmopolitan have called us a game changer. Vogue has even called us chic. Evening Standard has said innovation was lacking until we came along. So we're really happy about the press feedback, but more importantly to us, we love the feedback from buyers right now. So we've sold tens of thousands of tampons since our soft launch. We actually cannot meet demand, and that's why we need a scale, and that's why we've got this loan. But this, at the end of the day, is the most important thing to us. We've invented something, we believe we're adding value, are people buying it? And these are quotes only from the last month. And this one's my favorite, just gotten earlier this week. This product has changed my life. And we're really excited about that. And excited about that because this is also not a one-off product. If you like our product, we have a monopoly on this, and you have to buy from us for decades. So it's pretty exciting that commercially it's going to be great, but I'm going to tie in some other things about how we're a company built with purpose. So one of the things I'm very grateful for is Nigel and his team knew about what a B Corp is. So this thing I'm very proud of. A B Corp means that we're an ethical company that has to meet this very rigorous standards because we want to give back to society. So we are still a for-profit company, but my articles of association have changed such that we value the environment, our staff, and the communities in everything we do. And I think that's the future of capitalism. As everyone knows, things go badly because of big disparity, but I think there is an honorable and right way to make money, and I think it's valuing everything else and just not trying to focus on a single bottom line. Another thing I'm very proud of is this Made in Britain stamp. So we are in a consortium called Made in Britain with a bunch of 1,000 other British manufacturers. One note that I got from Nigel's presentation earlier is he said that inertia is one of your biggest competitors. And I hadn't heard that before, but that's absolutely right. It's not going to be easy for us to get women to change their habits that they've been using for decades. We've got a big challenge ahead of us, and we need every advantage that we can get, and that includes making it in Britain. So I've met a lot of other CEOs who are now printing money in, say, the wound care arena, because third world countries are like China. They don't trust made in China, and they like made in Britain. So for us, we have no interest in going to the Far East or even going to Eastern Europe. We believe making this in Britain, as expensive as it is, brings a lot of prestige and confidence to what we're trying to sell. So, conclusion about the company, there's proven demand for our product. We have spent, before I joined full-time for 4 years, we spent 10 years fighting for patents. We have now 4 families of patents and design registrations and all these things that we had to put in place to make sure no one can copy us. And this is really exciting. Clearview, one of the leading IP independent consultancy companies in the UK for IP, they're advisors to Vodafone. They have done a careful analysis of our company, and they've predicted that we can hit 1.1 billion in sales by year 6. So we are really delighted about that, and if they're 99% off, I'd be jumping up for joy still. So it's really exciting for us. So, Innovate UK loan. So why have we applied for it? Well, and what are we using it for? I guess this is our project title, so it's very much a case of, it says what it's doing on the tin. Our project title is a new high-speed production process development for a game-changing femcare product. And I have here that it's completely bespoke and novel automated process developed here in the UK, et cetera, et cetera. So what does that mean in layman's terms? We can't meet demand right now. We have a wonderful product. It is made very slow and manually, and also that was backed by Innovate UK. Innovate UK about a year and a half ago gave us a proof of concept loan that helped me work with 4 PhDs, a couple universities, and we were able to get to the next stage. But now that we've started selling our product, albeit at a very bad negative margin, we need to scale up, and we need to build a machine that's never been built before. One of the great things about the UK is definitely a center of excellence for bespoke automated manufacturing, and we need money to do that, and that's what this money is being used for. So we have a very defined project. Why have we gone for this loan as well? Patient, affordable, flexible capital. Again, it says exactly as it does on the tin. We can easily find inexpensive ways to go, I don't know, the Far East, find poor engineering, but we refuse to compromise, and we take everything we do very seriously. This is a great responsibility for us. We're making a product that if you use incorrectly, you can get very, very sick or worse. And this is an unregulated industry, believe it or not. There are more regulations and laws to make a hairdryer than there is to make femcare products. And so we believe this should be a medical product, and how do you maintain control and make it good is you make it here in the UK. So the capital allows us to do that. And of course, this kind of money is not meant for early stage startups. This is for scale up, which we believe we are. And so this machine allows us to unleash the full commercial possibilities of our company. And let me talk about numbers here. It really is transformational. I've hired 11 people in the last 10 months, and I'm going to hire 23 in the next 2 years, all in very high quality jobs. And to meet the demand that we've got, let alone in the UK or Europe, but we're going to create a lot of other jobs, and also in creative engineering, insurance, and to put numbers into perspective here, one single machine, this first machine that's being used, will help us scale up by 100 times. So that's just one machine, so we're excited about our prospects. So, why an Innovate UK loan? Again, patient, affordable, flexible capital. I don't need to tell you guys why you should apply for this, but I did want to say one story about this, that it's so helpful, and it is genuinely very flexible. The fact that we intend to get asset financing in due course, we're going to get all types of different loans, as one should do, but this kind of loan is going to work with that. They're going to be the junior of all the senior lenders, and that flexibility is really important to us. Patient, as you know, it's up to 10 years, although, hint, don't apply for 10 years. Apply for less, as Nigel said, 7 years is a good maximum. I think we've gone for 6, but if you want to grow properly, you need patient capital. You got to be careful of people who give you a lot of money, or VC firms who just want an instant return and are forced to sell your company because they have to do a exit their funds. So it's great to have this type, and of course affordable. 3.7% is great. So why are we so excited about this loan? Also, speed of execution is unbelievable for this. I was here in March. I applied in May. 6 weeks later, they told me I'm in the next round. Then I had 2 presentations. I think it might be 1. I don't know. We had 2. And on the 13th of August, we had our first drawdown. That's unbelievable. That's a few months from applying, we got our first drawdown. No one works that fast. And that means a lot when time is the most important thing for us, and that's what we have running against us. So there's a real big bonus that Innovate UK don't talk about, but that is an exceptional speed. I don't know if it's usually like this, because I think there might be 200 applications in this tranche, but that was really impressive and much appreciated. Of course, it's a two-way street to get that. Every time Kat gave us a question or due diligence from Nigel's team, we were on it right away. So it's a two-way street. So of course, it depends how fast you get back to Innovate UK. Prestige and credibility with suppliers, vendors, peers, investors, staff, industry, and customers. So I'm in an industry that is not blockchain, not artificial intelligence, not robotics, not medical. I'm selling a femcare product, and most people glaze over, especially men, when I'm talking about this. No one wants to talk about it. I'm always fighting for credibility and or being an authority. And having an Innovate UK loan or having any type of backing from the government is very impressive. You should leverage that if you're lucky enough to get it. It gives people you get instant respect from it. So my job every day is trying to persuade suppliers, manufacturers, partners to work with us. And I'm a startup or a scale-up. They'll be like, well, you haven't sold anything yet. No, that's just all forecast. But when you tell them that you've gone through really tough due diligence and the government is trusting taxpayer money to give or lend to you, that's a lot of prestige. So if you're not that good at being able to leverage this, which is my next point, hire a PR agency, work on what you need to really leverage to do more. And when I mean leverage, also extra leverage, we can't meet demand. We have some revenue, but we're always fundraising, but I'm always conscious of who we should raise money from. I don't want to take VC money. Our phone is ringing off the hook from every major consumer goods VC because of all our press, because of the Innovate loan stuff, but I want to find the right partners, and what helps you do that is this type of loan. We can talk to more angel investors and say, look, everything you're investing is like twice the price now because of the leverage that you're getting from this loan. And a really positive thing about this whole experience too, obviously I'm biased, we've gotten £1 million from the Innovate Loan team, but they're really positive partners. And what do I mean by positive partners? What is a negative person? Negative person, as you know, I like this saying, is someone who finds a problem for every solution, right? Innovate UK really want to work with you, and it's just amazing. I know all the team by their first names. We meet every so often, a little bit less so because of course they're busy, but they really genuinely want to work with you. And Nigel sent me an email a couple weeks ago. He wants to put a consortium of all the CEOs who've gone loans before. That's great stuff that really helps, and you can't be successful unless you have help from the right people. So that's been fantastic. So here's a juicy bit that I think is hopefully of most help to everyone here. How did we get the loan? So, a couple tips here. And again, I'm not talking too much science, too much details. I've decided to do this with some quotes that I like and give you anecdotes of what each one means. So, Sir Winston Churchill said this: a pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity. An optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. Now, what do I mean by that? So there is a Part A and a Part B for this loan application. Everyone here should know what a Part A is because most of you have applied for the grant. And then there's a Part B, but there's a lot of difficulty if you were to take up all the optional appendices. So Emma already made this point earlier, but you have up to 42 extra pages you can put into your application. And some people might say, oh wait, that's way too difficult, that's too much work. What that is it's like a 20-page business plan you can put in. You can put up to 20 pages talking about your team. Use it all. Seriously. I mean, everyone else, a lot of people won't do it. If you do it, that's where you can really talk about all your business. And again, for me, look, maybe this is not relevant for everyone because anyone can maybe understand artificial intelligence or blockchain, but I'm trying to convince people to invest in a femcare startup or lend to us. It's not easy. I welcomed that I had 42 pages to put diagrams, to put charts, to be able to sell my story. So I say take advantage of every opportunity you have to apply. Another saying, a picture says 1,000 words. Again, the application itself is 8 to 10 questions, a lot of text. You should write it correctly, of course, but nothing beats good charts, graphs, pictures. So capture the imagination with that. And if you're not good with that, if you guys are too technical, then go to St. Martin's, find an intern, get some people who can really jazz up in imagery and make it clear and easy to understand for people how they can buy into your dream and why they should trust you. The best defense is a good offense. So Here I have highlight in the risk registers and business plan your weaknesses and how you plan to eliminate them. We're all, you know, if it was that easy, we wouldn't be applying for this loan. If our business was great, there's a lot of risks. I had very small fonts on all my risk registers. I told them all the challenges we have, but I had a plan for how we're going to eliminate every single one. So I'm not the type of person to shy away from things and hope Nigel and his team doesn't see that we're missing a marketing team or whatever it might be. But I say you put it up front and make it easy for them. Say like, we are weak on marketing, we are weak on commercialization, but this is our plan to fix it. This is how your money is going to help us grow. I don't know about you, but I like that. I like time is the most valuable thing to me. No one wants to waste time. If you make it easy for them, so you're telling them why they might not invest in you or lend to you, address it. Don't hope that they look over it, because the team is really smart and they do read every word. So I think that I somehow got the impression when I met the team during the credit committee meetings, they read everything, and there's no getting past them. So don't try and hide. The best, again, defense is a good offense. There's an app for that. So what I mean there, and obviously it's trademark because that's an Apple thing. One of the things that the team, when they came, so we passed the first round, and then they came to meet our management team. But you could see, I think it was Nigel and Scott and Kat, their eyes light up when we did a brief part of our presentation was about our control, about using technology to give them confidence that we know what we're doing, but more so that we're organized and do our best. So what do I mean by that by an app? Use technology. So, for example, anyone here could ask me, what was the invoice, how much we spent 3 years ago as a supplier? I can find that on my app because we use something called Receipt Bank. Receipt Bank is just an online tool that every receipt you have, it just goes up in the cloud and you can search for it. And maybe I shouldn't say this because I think next door there's a Sage meeting. Xero is an online accountancy tool that it's amazing. I can do monthly, quarterly reports from my phone. It's just everything's on the cloud. And these kind of things, I think it impress the Innovate UK team because they want to know you're organized, that you're just not geeky tech people, that you keep track of every penny and you know where it is. I could do that in front of them. Any question they had, okay, what did you spend it? I did it in seconds. Do they need a report? I get to do it in 2 minutes. And it takes effort setting up, but use technology to your advantage, and I think they really like that. Cross your T's, dot your I's. Okay, this is a very obvious one. Nigel mentioned it earlier, but when I was at this presentation in March, I was mortified when Scott gave me in his presentation, he gave a few examples how people were applying for a project of 1.3 million. They wanted a loan of £1 million, but then when they did the model, they only put the loan, they didn't put the whole project costs, or they didn't pay back, they didn't include interest, let alone the repayment of the loan. Just make sure everything's consistent, get a second pair of eyes. I actually didn't know that the KTN looks at applications. I probably might have used that, but pay attention to detail, look at all the small print, and there are some basic things that you should make sure is consistent throughout the narrative and the financial information you send. Failing to plan is planning to fail. Your project is only part of a much bigger plan. So this one, the story is our second management presentation. I actually don't remember why we had two, but we did meet in our second one the Chief Innovation Officer, Tim Sawyer from Innovate UK. Maybe they were Chief Investment Officer. Sorry. Maybe they were nervous. They wanted to double check, but we had to go through two management presentations. But I remember Tim was really impressed. Because, you remember these things, you're hoping they'll pay attention to this or that, but I remember Tim was really impressed that we were planning for an entire business as a business that didn't just include this first machine or didn't just include this project. Your whole business shouldn't be just about this project. So I remember he was like, wow, you actually have in your 6-year forecast machine number 2, machine number 3, licensing, and I'm glad we had that because he was harping on about that, and that obviously helped us. So I'd suggest, as difficult as it is, for 6 or 7 years of forecasting, spend a lot of time on it and plan for every part of your business in it, and people will acknowledge that. I think this is my...
We need to...
oh yeah, this is my last slide. So Two last points. Alone we go fast, together we go far. So probably one of the best advice I could give is it's going to be your team that determines whether you get this loan or not. You can look good on paper, but they're going to come and visit you, and I think at the end of the day, Nigel and his team were most excited because they felt that we had a team working on this. So if you're missing certain things, that doesn't mean you shouldn't apply. Say how you're going to address it, but make sure you sell yourself as a team. And finally, last quote here, ever tried, ever failed, no matter, try again, fail better. I don't know if Nigel knows this, but we've been rejected 4 times for grants. It's been, those have been very, very tough, a lot of time spent. Don't take it personal. It's obviously very competitive, but you learn from failure. Failure is not falling down. Failure is whether you get up or not. It's hundreds of hours that have been spent, but genuinely, they really want to help. And even if you fail, try again. I'm sure this pilot program is just too good. They're going to do it again. Nigel might not like this, but you apply again, get better. And for me, tell people how you've improved. What have you done better from your last application? So, work hard at it. Pay attention to all the opportunities that they have, and be brave and keep trying. So.
Thank you very much indeed. You didn't have 2 management presentations. The first time we came out was sort of the detailed credit analysis, but we like visiting companies. So more than just your credit specialist Kat came out. Scott and I came as well. I'm going to wrap up really quickly. Key dates. Please read the instructions. Please register by the 14th of November at noon. If you don't register, you can't apply. If you do register, you'll get Part A sent to you by email. You'll get a link through to the FTP site where Part B, the project finance form, and the business financial spreadsheet can be downloaded. You complete those together with any optional appendices. You must have uploaded those successfully no later than noon on the 21st of November. If you're later than noon on the 21st of November, your application will be ineligible, will be sadly rejected. We expect to get back to you 11th of January as to whether you're going to go forward for detailed credit analysis. How long it takes after that depends on your responsiveness, the level of our questions. We expect projects to start probably March-ish next year. This is what you will need to submit to us. Part A, your project, 10 questions. Part B, your business, 7 questions. Both of those Word documents in narrative form. You can't break the document to get more stuff in it. Use the appendices, please. Someone tried last time. They did break the document, completely took it apart, put in loads more stuff than was permitted, and were rejected, sadly. Condensing it, being concise and compelling would have been a better approach. You have to submit a spreadsheet called the project finance form, the financing specifically around the costs in your project, the eligible project costs and any ineligible project costs that you're going to cover. The business financial spreadsheet, backward-looking historic financial statements, forward-looking cash flow forecasts, profit and loss account and balance sheets. I'm a boring accountant. I like to see profit and loss, balance sheet, cash flow all tying together. It's triangulating and make sure that it actually works. Sorry, I'm boring. But we think it's really important because this is cash flow lending. Optionally, you can add appendices. Please use the right file naming conventions that are set out in the guidance for applicants. Otherwise, we'll lose them. So please do as we ask. Don't make up your own names for them. Everybody, not everybody, a lot of people still do, but please don't. And if you have any questions, if you need any additional clarity, please read the instructions. Contact customer support services in Swindon. They'll route it through, quite likely to me, and chase me to make sure I do provide a good answer to you. I hope that that has been helpful. I hope that you can see how an innovation loan might fit within your technology development strategy, your commercial strategy, your funding strategy for those things, so that you can innovate, so that you can grow, so that we can grow the UK economy with our support and your hard work, and that we can do some cool things and have fun together, because actually when I see a business that's moving forward, hearing the story from Thang there, that's my idea of fun. I really, really enjoy that, and hopefully you will too. Thank you very much indeed. I'm sorry that we've gone 25 minutes over time. That's my fault, and I do apologise. We've got some lunch outside. The folks online, I hope you have put up with us going on for a little bit longer. Thank you very much indeed for all your attention. The slides will be sent round, and let's go grab some lunch. Thank you very much indeed, everyone, for your attention.